Make a start. So we will reconvene the hearings panel meeting, which was adjourned from yesterday afternoon. So we'll start with apologies for today's session. I've got an apology for lateness from James Goff. He'll be with us in about 15 minutes. I've got an apology for lateness from Jimmy Chen, who apparently is stuck in horrendous traffic and expects to be here in about 10 minutes. I've got an apology for a short period of absence from Aaron. And then I've got apologies for the whole session this morning from the Mayor and Councillor MacDonald. So I'm happy to move those apologies. Pauline will second.
Oh, sorry, I have an apology. Absence from 12 to 12:30.
So a short period of absence from Pauline as well. Okay.
I will have the odd absence. I've got to deal with a couple of issues.
And short periods of absence from James Daniels. And Tim, you'll second. All right, so moved by me, seconded by Tim. All those in favour say aye. Against, that's carried. Declarations of interest, just repeating what Leanne has said at the beginning of all of these meetings. There will be individuals and groups that we're hearing from that we've got relationships or involvement with. We don't need all of those interests to be declared formally, but just disengaging from that part of the meeting is the right thing to do when that happens. And then we move to item 3, which is the continuation of the hearing of verbal submissions for the draft long-term plan 2021 to 2031. So starting this morning with Beth Rouse. Beth, are you here? Could I please call you to the table? Thank you. Okay, so you've got 5 minutes to present your submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Morena. I am Beth Rouse, and this is Murray James.
Morena.
And we are part of the Avebury House Community Trust, which has administered the Avebury House, wonderful piece of heritage on what used to be River Road, the River Road frontage running along the river corridor, or what the river corridor now adjoins. We appreciate this opportunity to present our submission on the council's LTR. And rather than go endlessly over the points we have here, I'm going to pass the baton to Murray James, who's just going to be quite specific about several of the points that we have included in our submission, and obviously hope that we can answer questions that you yourselves would have. Murray.
Kia ora koutou. Start with the Otakaro Avon River Corridor. It's been said many times before, so I won't go over it in too much detail, but we support the submissions of the many others, the Avon Otakaro Network, Food Resilience Network, and countless others who have said, let's bring that budget forward. It's an enormous asset for the community. We sit right on the border of the section of that runs through Richmond, and we know from connection with our community, with Avebury being a bit of a beacon and a hub in Richmond and wider, that there are many groups, many individuals out there who are itching to get in there and activate that space. We need council to lead the way by setting the groundwork with the stop banking and other infrastructure projects so that they can get going with confidence. In terms of heritage, Avebury House is obviously a beautiful piece of retained heritage in Christchurch. We absolutely, without doubt, support a targeted heritage rate. That is a fabulous addition to council policy, and something that can preserve not just the heritage fabric, but also the stories and the utility of heritage around the city. We consider ourselves lucky at the AHCT to have one of council's assets under our loving care, or kaitiaki. We would put our hand up immediately, and will do anyway, for a share of whatever is going in terms of heritage funding. Avebury House has not had an update to its heritage protection plan since the late 90s, early 2000s. It's 20 years old and well out of date. There are a lot of intrusive additions that have been made over the years that we would love to see removed and enhanced. We can also enhance amenity if we're given the budget to do so. The Trust has a broad range of ideas. We'd love to engage with Council around making some of those reality. Finally, essentially around funding not-for-profit community organisations. Said this before, say it again. The funding model currently is enormously draining on the volunteer resources that have to apply regularly for funds to keep our staff employed. If we miss one or make an error and don't get it, it absolutely hammers our operating budgets. The model doesn't work. We'd like to see something different. We'd like to engage with Council around how to fund community organisations that are effective, we think we are, more long-term and with more sustainability. There's a series of budget cuts around funding community organisations. We encourage you to have a relook at that because you do get good bang for buck out of organisations like ours in their activities around the community. That'll do. Any questions?
Thank you. That leaves time maybe just for one question. Tim.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your presentation. With community groups like yourselves that have been more established and are very solid, would you prefer like a business type plan for funding? So it would be like a 3-year plus 2. So with your business plan, they're generally 3 years.
Yep.
So you wouldn't have to, but in that 3rd year, you reevaluate with the funder, and then you either have to reapply or you are actually on track and you can get another 2. Would that be the type of thing you'd be looking at? Absolutely,
yes. And from our perspective, we would like to be able to hold reserves so we're not always bouncing along the bottom of insolvency. Our social enterprise activity covers about 30% of our operating budget, and we're hard out on that. We've almost got full capacity at Avery House.
Because as a funder, I mean, I think it's quite fair to ask what those reserves are and what the plan is for them, because that's just good management and it just show good vision. So I don't have a problem with that at all, but it's some groups, as you can imagine, we've had that have huge reserves and there's no real point to them.
Yep, understand.
So, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much indeed. That brings us to the end of the time set aside for the submission. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so if I could now call Matthew Brosnahan to the table, please. Matthew, good morning. Thank you for joining us. And again, you've got 5 minutes for the presentation this morning. Thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you for the opportunity to talk, and I'm here to talk on the support of the stormwater plans for the council, and in particular the stormwater for the Otukaikino stormwater facility. The Otukaikino stormwater facilities will be adjacent to the Otukaikino Wildlife Management Reserve, which is at Belfast. I asked last time how many people have been there. Good, that's great. And now with the new motorway, you can see it daily as people pass by, look down on it. So the Otukaikino Reserve, it sits by the new motorway, the Christchurch Northern Motorway there, and has the benefit of the new shared cycle path, which has access under the bridge there on the main North Road. And sitting adjacent across the road will come out a new neighbour, the Otukaikino Stormwater Facility, which is in your long-term plan. The land has been purchased and we're in the 2-year design phase, and that's what I'm really keen to be involved in as a neighbour. The new stormwater facility will basically double the area of wetland as you approach Christchurch in that area, and it's got great opportunity to sort of enhance the area in many ways. So the initial plans is just for 2 large water bodies, and they drain out through the drain goes through the Otukaikino Reserve and out under the motorway and out to the Otukaikino stream. They drain through the reserve as a easement of the City Council. So looking from back, and this will be the sort of scene as you come in from Christchurch from the north, you have the Otakaikino Reserve, and then across the road you'll have this large area of equal size of a stormwater facility. And the effect will be, you've got the potential to have this really quite amazing natural landscape as you enter Christchurch. And there's the ability to pick up on the design phase to really enhance this. It'll be quite spectacular, and to come into Christchurch from the north and not see car sales and industry, but just this big, large natural landscape is quite a sort of significant event. The stormwater facility which will be on the right-hand side of the road there, and the existing drain goes through the reserve, and the spring water from the reserve meets that stormwater there. And one of those things is the Otakaikino wetland is a Waitapu site, and there's significant cultural issues that have never really been addressed in the 60s when the stormwater went in through this and with the motorway developments. And it's a really great opportunity. We've got 2 years of planning to really to speak to the local runanga and that, and to really come to grips with that. There's cultural issues and there's also hydrological issues that can be dealt with in this phase. And also, there's also issues, the stormwater goes, if you've seen the far distance, there's just a channel cut out to the Otakaikino stream. This was done when the motorway was put in the 60s. And there's even a little space in the stormwater between the motorways that you might see. And it's sort of no man's land. No one deals with it, yet it's ecologically quite significant because it allows enhanced fish passage as they have to pass up the pipes under the motorway. So, in summary, then, the Live Memorial Trust strongly supports the development of the Otakaikino stormwater facility. The improvements to the water quality and increased available habitat will make significant ecological gains. There is the potential to create an amazing visual landscape to the northern entrance of Christchurch. The project needs to include the stormwater drain through the Otakaikino Wildlife Management Reserve and out to the stream. There is a cultural component related to the mixing of the spring waters. The stormwater facility will increase available recreation activities at the area. The stormwater facility will have a place people can walk, people be able to walk dogs, where the reserve is a wildlife reserve and dogs are not permitted. And also I'd like to just add on the potential, there will be car parks with the stormwater facility, potential to look at that and maybe increase them to allow park and ride. It's a perfect spot for that, and that you've got links to the cycleway, and our car parks is becoming the de facto park and ride, and to allow for that in the planning would be a really good thing. So the main thing really is that we really want to be on board in the planning, and I think we can create a really amazing site.
Great. Look, thank you very much indeed for an excellent submission. Thanks for the work that you're doing. That does bring us to the end of the 5 minutes. So unfortunately, there isn't time for questions, but thank you very much indeed for the presentation and for being with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next I would call, we've got Brent Martin and Jan Cook, who are joining us by Zoom. Brent and Jan, good morning. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. You're representing the Friends of Banks Peninsula, and you've got 5 minutes for your submission this morning.
Thank you. The Friends of Banks Peninsula has taken a strong interest in the Akaroa wastewater project because the supply of water and the disposal of wastewater can both have major impacts on the environment. In the draft LTP, the council states it is applying a climate lens over the entire plan for the first time. We applaud the sentiment, but suggest it needs to be more rigorously and holistically applied because current spending priorities do not reflect these objectives. The council draft climate change strategy identifies and highlights water supply on Banks Peninsula as infrastructure that is vulnerable to sea level rise and increasingly under threat. At the same time, it aims to promote sustainable water use and waste minimisation. This is reinforced in 2018, which identified water and wastewater as core responsibilities and acknowledges the core state of the network. They have noted the media report yesterday on the Research Commission by the Greater Christchurch Council found that the word most residents chose to describe the Christchurch they would most like to see in 2050 was sustainable, and that the desire to protect the environment was strongly the number one wish. Aotearoa and Devoto have been under
Jan, there are times when we're finding it quite difficult to hear you. I think if you speak quite closely into the microphone, you'll be fine. That's better.
Aotearoa and Devoto have been under level 4 water restrictions since December. That is 5 months now, with no outdoor water use at all. Can't water the garden, can't wash the car or dog, hose down the deck or fill a paddling pool. Our area relies on streams for water supplies. There are no aquifers of note. Last winter was abnormally dry, with forecasts now suggesting the coming winter may be the same. So perhaps the new normal. Summer rainfall has been negligible. Water is being tanked in from elsewhere. This is not acceptable service for residents, nor is it sustainable. At the same time, the Aotearoa wastewater network is failing badly, with stormwater leaking in and raw sewage periodically leaking out and polluting the harbour. And Aotearoa's surrounding seawater quality has failed 46 out of 63 tests for microorganism concentrations in the past year. Aotearoa's creaking water and wastewater networks are clearly already cause for serious concern, and the cost for the so-called Aotearoa Reclaimed Water Treatment and Reuse Scheme that has been adopted by the Council are eye-watering. Incredibly, this scheme does not reuse the water in Aotearoa where it is desperately needed, but instead requires complex, costly infrastructure to take the water to another catchment where it will be used to irrigate planted native vegetation. Native vegetation does not need planting or irrigation to grow well on Banks Peninsula, and much larger areas of reforestation could be achieved at much less cost by simply acquiring marginal land and locking it up. So in summary, Aotearoa is still growing, but the water supply is shrinking. Where is the water going to come from in the future? Treating wastewater to a high standard and then piping it out of the area is squandering a precious resource and an opportunity to mitigate against future water shortages caused by climate change. And building complex infrastructure, costly infrastructure to irrigate planted native bush is not a sustainable use of resources. Far greater benefit could be extracted from the water by reusing it in the Aotearoa catchment, and by this we mean not just purple pipe but replenishment of that catchment. Water charges proposed are too low, allocation is too generous, and charge for excess not high enough. It doesn't encourage water saving except by the worst offenders. Everyone should pay some charge for water, even if for most it is fairly modest, as a constant reminder to use water wisely. So we're asking you to focus on sustainability, ensure that there is sufficient budget for the full repair of the sewer network, and to reduce the wastewater volume, and focus upfront spending on recycling, reuse in the Aotearoa catchment. And there's much more detail of this in our full submission. Really.
All right, thank you. So that's the presentation. That leaves time for one question, if there is one. No questions? All right, Jan and Brent, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning, and some points very well made. Thanks very much indeed for the time. Thank you. So now I would invite Dr. Matthew Payne, representing Te Runanga o Kokorarasa, to the table. Matthew, good morning. Thank you for joining us. And you have 10 minutes to address us this morning. Thank you.
Kia ora. Kia mohio mai tātou kei te whakatakoto e nei kōrero. Ai roto I tō tātou reo rakatira. I kōrero tia kētia mātou ki tēnei āhuataka I te wā. I tukuna tā mātou puka tono kia koutou. Nō rere mihi nei ki a koe, Andrew, nau tui nei hui I whakahaere. Tai atu rā kia koutou e ka kai kauni hera. Nā ia te mihi no te runa ko kaukau rarata kia koutou. E kawe nei I e nei take nunui no mātou. Hei whakatako tōraka mā tēnei huka kia kita I te huarahi ea ai ka nawe ka mauria mai nei e mātou. Nō reira, i roto i tō mātou puka tono, te roa ka ake o a mātou nawe, tēnei mātou e hara mai i tēnei rā ki te kōrero. I roto i te reo o tātou tūpuna, kia kawe mai te wairua tika mo e nei nawe. Hau ka anō ka take i roto i tēnei pepa. Tēnei au hei kawe i te wairua o rātou mā kua karo ki te pō. Nō reira, tēnei au e mihi ana. E mihi ana i te āhuataka e wā te ana tō tātou reo rakatira ki roto i tō tātou whare o te honoka i tēnei rā. Mōku ake nei, kei te mōhio au kua pānuitia kētia koutou i enei kupu Pākehā i roto i tēnei puka tono. Ko te take tuatahi ka mauria mai nei māua ko Graham Page tēnei. E pāna ki te ori te taka. Te ori te taka o te iwi Māori me te iwi Pākehā. Tēnei te kaupapa i tuhi nei i roto i te ātikara tuatoru o te tiriti o Waitaki. Nā mō mātou nei i roto o Kaukau Rarata, kaore he ori te taka mo te iwi Māori e noho mai rā ki tērā takiwā. No te tau ko 1909 i tuhi o mātou tipuna ki te kāwanataka ki te kaunihira o tautahi hoki. Kei whea te ara wai, hei inu, hei horoi, hei whakapai te oraka tonutaka mō mātou te iwi Māori. Kāore tērā tono i ea. Nā reira, ka whakahauhia tērā tono i te tau 2013. Te wā i whakahauhia te huka katoa o Kaukau Rarata. Kei whea te huarahi mō ka ara wai, mā mātou nei o te haukaika. Ka pahuri mai te wā, ka pahuri mai te kotahi rau tau, kei te pērā tonu tā mātou nawe. Kāore he wai ka whakaihia ki te hāpori o Kaukau Rarata. Kei te noho pohara mātou. Kei te noho pohara mātou i te āhuataka ki te kore he ua i taka mai i a raki nui, i a hine parawhenua mea, kāore mātou i inu. Kāore mātou e whākai ana i a mātou tamariki. Kāore anō hoki mātou e manakitia tonutia ki a tātou manuhiri e tai mai ana ki ruka o Kaukau Rarata. Nau, ko te take tuatahi tērā. Ko te tuarua mā mātou ake, kia noho hei takata tiriti, hei takata whenua. Pēnei mātou me koutou o te kaunihira. No mātou nei ko koutou a mātou hoa tiriti. Kāri tu atu i tērā, kāri kō mai. Heoi ko te take ka mauria mai nei mātou, e ai ki ētahi kāore te kaunihira o te tāone o tautahi nei, ka noho hei hoa tiriti mā mātou. En kei te tino whakahe mātou ki tērā kōrero. Mō mātou nei ko koutou tērā te kanohi o te kāwanataka ki roto o tautahi nei. Nā reira mātou e aki ana kia koutou kia whakakia e rā hu. Motu hake mo te kanohi o te kāwanataka ki o tautahi nei. Te tuatoru e pāna ki kā mea parawhenua. Ka mihini āhei, ka mihini ohorere i te huka hāpori ki te taimai he parawhenua. I roko ai mātou ki roto o tautahi nei whā te kaumārua. Ka mihini ohorere. Mō mātou nei o Kaukau Rarata, kāri te kotahi. Nō reira tā mātou take, kawea mai he mihini ohorere mo te parawhenua mō mātou nei o te takiwā o Kaukau Rarata. Ko te take whakamutuka māku mo tēnei rā e pāna ki te whakapikika o ka reti. Kei te tino whakahe mātou ki tērā tuāhuataka. E whakahe ana i te mea kaore mātou e āhei ana ki ka ratoka e whakaihia ana e te kaunihera nei. Nō reira, ki te kore a mātou ratoka, hea te take mā mātou kia piki ake te utu mō ka rete. Nō reira, kaore mātou mō te runa ko Kaukau Rarata e whakai ana ki tērā. I roto i te mōhiotaka, ki te kore he ori te taka, tā mātou take tuatahi. Hea te take ka piki ka ake e rā utu mā mātou. E noho pohara tonu ana i te koreka o te wai. Nō reira, mō tēnei wā ka aukati hia ka kōrero. Nā te mea, kei roto i tēnei puka a mātou kōrero katoa. Nō reira, me he pātai a koutou, tukuna mai. Māku pēr hei whaka mārama tia i te reo tuarua kia mārama pai tātou, ka whakautu mō ka pātai. He oi mō tēnei wā mihi nei kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning for the verbal submission. We've got Kaharoa and Shane here with us, so certainly they will be able to assist with our understanding of what you've presented to us this morning. And we've also got your very interesting written submission and obviously the attachments to that as well, which also made for very interesting reading. We do have time for some questions, if councillors have questions. Sarah.
Tēnā kōrua. I've read the submission and I caught some of what you were, sorry I didn't understand more of it, but the references to the documents and the need for the reticulated water supply for drinking, washing, those kind of things. Do you have an idea what that might look like? So what's the population size and what are your hopes for what the reticulation and things might look like?
Ka huri au ki te whati te parawa ma. I'll speak in English kia marama pai tātou.
Kia ora.
The plan we have is exactly the same as the plan that was submitted in 1909. Right. The population has grown only just. In 1909 we petitioned on behalf of 68 of our people, on behalf of the dairy industry that we controlled at that stage, and on behalf of our children who were dying from hydatids from the water that we were drinking from the creek. Kaukau Rarata as a wider community probably possesses a population around 600 when you think of all the places that are in the bay. Our main concern, of course, are those that are closest within our native reserve, which is our area of responsibility. It was the area we were evicted to following the 1849 Port Levy purchase, and it's the area we have a very special relationship with. Our ability to bring people home is predicated upon services. And for over a century, our people, when we have the records, have followed every official process, including today. We're at the stage where we are beyond frustration, and we're looking for our treaty partner to work with us. And so local solutions, we have plenty. We would love to work in a co-developed, co-funded environment, and that's been part of our take. Our reason for submitting the way we have is that the LTP currently is absent of any consideration, yet there are other communities in our takiwā that haven't been asking as long as us that have some very significant investment. And what we're looking for is ori te taka, equity.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Thank you. Any further questions? James.
Tēnā kōrua, kei te mihi moto kōrero i te reo rangatira. So, as you'll know, I have a question. As you know, I'm not fully fluent, particularly fluent i te reo Māori, but I did understand that you were basically explaining in words as to what's in your written submission, so we could follow your kōrero. My question is, do you realise that you probably had the most attention of any of our submitters to date? All the councillors had both their eyes and their ears tuned into you, so ka pai tō mahi.
Tēnā koe, James.
No?
Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you very much indeed for being with us this morning. The content of the submission is well understood. We'll be working with our staff to further the issues that you've raised. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to be here with us this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So next I would call Mark Duff to the table, representing the Greater Hornby Residents Association. And Mark, you've got 5 minutes to present to us this morning. Thank you.
Kia ora, Deputy Mayor, councillors and staff. Beside me I've got Paris Holiday, who is actually a member of our Greater Hornby Residents Association, who gives us our youth voice. She's an eco-warrior, so she helps us out on that account as well. And she's also a student mentor and an older adult mentor to our committee. Thank you for keeping the pool funding on track last year, just going backwards. It's meant a great deal to our community, and there's great excitement also in the area. I think it's fair to say, Paris, the school really looking forward, and seeing it happen across the road, to see something come in front of their eyes is really exciting. And we just want to take this chance also to wish the Linwood area all the best for the opening of their pool coming up soon. I know how much you'll be looking forward to it as well.
So Mark, you've got 5 minutes on the LTP submission, and then you've got a further 5 minutes on the DC policy. That's essentially 10 minutes for you to use between the two.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The first presentation is on the water charges. As an association, we say no to these. Our reason is that the council have a 20% leakage in their own water, and we'd like to see that fixed before you start charging residents. We've heard in council meetings recently that you don't have the tracking ability to trace a lot of this water and where it is, and also that that unit is understaffed. That come from a staff member, and I think it would be good to put more resources into that area to help you. This was at the height of our water restrictions in Hornby due to the Denton well. It took over 6 weeks to get any traction on getting this fixed. When we hit it on Facebook, on our association page, it was fixed within 36 hours. So, but despite all our snaps sent themselves. Just moving on to Goulding Ave, this has been a major issue in our area for over 15 years now. As you can see, both footpaths are flooded. And last night we put on our Facebook page that the rain was due again. Get ready, Goulding Ave. And some of the comments that the residents put was, is it time to get the biscuit out again? Can I book the kids in for a bath? And I hope the lifeguards are on duty. You can see by this shot here, this is 4 to 5 hours after rain had actually finished in Hornby, and we've got pedestrians and cyclists having to go off the crossing. This is dangerous because when the lights change green, if they're forced to go too far off the crossing, we can actually have cars coming towards our pedestrians and our cyclists, which is not great. You may have been aware, we used an April Fool's joke this year to try and get our message across that the City Council was going to appoint lifeguards to this corner. While it was a joke, it is actually a serious issue, and this lady here with the pram took this photo and sent it to us as a message saying, oh, what do I do? So we'd like some action on that after 16 years. This is not the Waikola skate park, but it's actually the Hallswell skate park. I noticed Richmond Residents and Business Association in their presentation yesterday tried to put it in Hornby as well. It would have been nice if they could have uplifted it and put it in Hornby, but this is actually in Hallswell, and this is what we would like to aim towards. So now we come back to the future, because this is Waikola Park. It's Hornby's ferry meter skate parks. And why we refer to Back to the Future, as a skate park originated when Back to the Future actually come out. Waikola Park is run down and locals feel unsafe, especially young youth. Fix it well, they will come, they will respect it. What we're asking for is if the funding can be brought forward for this, because it's actually more than just fixing a park, it's actually fixing a security issue in our area, safety of our children, safety of our residents. And you can see how well the Hallswell skate park works, and the difference in the image between our skate park and theirs. So we've had a lot of meetings within the community. Our community board staff have been fabulous in trying to get everyone together to try and come up with a solution. But it's a rundown area and it's in attracting the wrong sort of people. Is that fair, Paris?
Yep.
On to the next slide. This is more an NZTA issue, but it's one we just wanted to bring to the council's attention. From the countdown to the Hornby hub, there's no pedestrian access, which is causing danger and stranded pedestrians. What it doesn't show too well, but in that picture, that lady is holding a bag that she loves New Zealand. We don't really think she's loving Hornby at this precise moment. She's stranded, and it's really where our refugees end up in that crossing. I said yesterday on community funding, no cuts, please. I want to just give you an example this year where we held Easter hunts for the first time. We held them at 3 parks. The money we got from the community grants was not great, but what it enabled us to do was to go out in the community and get funding from businesses to assist us with our Easter hunts. So that money went a long way. At the end of the Easter hunt, we had one parent come up to us and say, "Thank you very much for putting this on, because my children would not have Easter this year if that wasn't the case." And this is our famous Waterloo Road. That still continues to be an issue. Paris, do you want to? It's a real danger for the students, and there's great concern in trying to get a signalised crossing across there would be the ultimate to bring us up to what our other students are getting around the city and giving them safe passage to school. Yesterday I talked a bit about engagement. We talked about the bubbles, how good they were. I just wonder as an idea, would it have been better to have like a railway line, and you start off this year and you go to 2031 and it shows you in your area what is going to happen. I think that would have given us the opportunity to see whether we could have changed things around in our community that we thought were more urgent than other areas. Every ward could have had its own railway line, and then we could have also had the central railway station showing us the bigger projects for the whole city, so that we can change it around if we saw necessary. Like the bubbles were great, but when we opened them up, it would say that there was an intersection improvement, and one of them might have even been that Shands Road corner, but we didn't specifically know what was going to happen at that corner. Finally, on our submission, I'd like to thank our local community board staff. They are just the best to work with. They're an absolute pleasure. They're always supportive. They're encouraging with our plans. They tell us when we think we've got things wrong and could do things better. And I also want to thank our elected members in Hornby for the support they give us as well, and also Anne Galloway, who quite often pops over the fence to have a look at us and make sure we're travelling all right. So thank you, Anne and Jimmy. Just moving on to the the contributions. I think there's 2 main points. We'd like to see them spent in our area, so that when we're getting the fill going on, that we are helping our infrastructure around it. The other big one is we get a lot of social housing in Hornby, and I think there's another one due to be announced that will be social housing, and there's also, we don't know what the future is of the Sockburn school site, but we just feel it'd be nice if central government could include somehow some contribution towards the infrastructure, because I understand they don't pay contribution fees for social housing, but some recognition from central government that there is a cost to the infrastructure around that. And that's where I'd like to finish. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much indeed. That does leave a couple of minutes for questions. Tim.
Thank you, Mark, and always a pleasure. I really did like your idea about the railway lines. I think that there's something we can talk to staff about. It's quite clever. So thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Not too hard, Jimmy.
Based on your, realize all Hornby the community, because a moment of the budget for renewal only, and also budget just for renewal is half of 9th Street. You understand Hornby people, particularly those teenagers, they would like to reach the kind of skate park, a new skate park. So both sides of keep original. The other one is first year is 24. You want to see this coming year, 22, that's for planning and also for the kind of the design only, 20K. So why stay on it?
I mean, obviously they want the very best skate park they can have, and they look at Hallswell as the ultimate that they want. But I think we talked about it with the pools. It doesn't have to be gold plated. It just needs to be something that looks nice, that they appreciate and want to use. I mean, at the moment we've got students who are too scared to walk into a street because of the environment that that park's creating, and that's a major issue.
Thank you. And time for one last quick question from Anne.
Kia ora, and thanks, Mark and Paris, for coming in. That was great. Have you ever talked with Chris Horn and talked about how they got the Hallswell skate park underway? Because I think she would be a really good person to talk to, particularly in engaging with young people and getting their voice coming through. So that's probably a suggestion more than a question. I can help you arrange that.
You had a question and the answer was no, but we appreciate the question.
And you're also aware of the great work that Emma's doing in Waikola Park, obviously, to improve that. And did I hear 20,000 as a figure for the skate park? Is that right? Yeah, right.
Planning and the design, just the council design.
Okay. Cool.
We have been working with Emma and Sam,
yep.
And as I said earlier, we really do appreciate the support we get from our community board staff.
They're doing great job. Thank you.
Excellent, Mark. Thank you very much indeed once again for joining us and for the points that you've raised in the submission. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. So our next presenter, Dave Hinman from the Tramway Historical Society. Dave, good morning. Thank you for joining us. There's an additional document on the hub, and you've got 5 minutes to present to us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to speak to today. I did send in a brief summary, which should be on view for you, or you've got it in front of you, I don't know, and I will just speak to that over the next few minutes. There's 3 parts to it. One's about the Christchurch Tramway extension. The second is about Ferrymead funding. The third is about general heritage funding. Just on the Christchurch Tramway extension, we support the council in its decision to proceed with the extension of the City Tramway. We wish to see the work of the tram commence on the tram and the High Street project in June, with completion in November, when we hope that overseas visitors, other than those already coming from Australia, will be returning. This will be of great assistance to the vitality and survival of the central city and particularly the Salt District. We also support the need for an additional substation for the tram in the locality and can assist the council in its provision. Moving on to Ferrymead funding, Ferrymead Heritage Park has always been underfunded, and if the LTP is approved in its present form, there could be a cut to current funding to the park from the council. We are concerned that COVID impact on funding suppliers such as lotteries, Rata Foundation and pub charities could affect us, and our submission gives examples of some of the projects where this might happen. The council needs to talk to central government about this and get them to come to the party. It still has its war chest, and Christchurch needs to be included in any future regional growth funding. Thirdly, general heritage funding. We support heritage conservation generally and have concerns about any possible reduction in heritage funding. Remaining heritage buildings fit well with the tram, and as they need retention as a reminder of the past. We support the council's heritage strategy, particularly those aspects relating to industrial and moving heritage, such as we have at Ferrymead. The council needs to advocate to central government for more funding in this area. I do have one additional point in relation to the Christchurch Tramway extension. We saw in the paper this morning the story about the new Christchurch National Sports Museum, and in that there is talk about it needing to be in the inner city, in proximity to the cultural precinct and adjacent to the town hall or other popular Christchurch attractions, and that you've already looked at the stadium and it won't fit there. Well, from our perspective, on the tram track would be a very desirable location, and there are some sites available. Some that immediately come to mind, which we know at the moment are sites which are unused, include the Clarendon Corner and the Anthony Goff site in Cashel Mall, and there are no doubt others as well. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
And thank you very much indeed for coming along to speak to us. That does leave time for some questions, if there are any. Are there any questions? All right, thank you. The submission is very, very clear. We did have the additional document available to us. That's in front of us. And thanks for coming along and speaking to it today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So next I would invite Sue Sullivan to the table, representing the Christchurch Tramway. Sue, good morning. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Andrew. Thank you very much.
And you've also got 5 minutes to present your submission.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me here. So I'm the CEO of Christchurch Attractions, of which the trams is a division. We regard them as unmissable Christchurch experiences for both domestic and international tourists. We take our role here in the city seriously, both as a commercial operator and a city partner to many businesses. Part of that includes our punters cleaning the Avon on a regular basis and native tree planting at the gondola in conjunction with Rapaki. So I will talk to three parts today: the tram extension, R&M on the tracks, and city and revitalisation. So a key focus for us is this extension, and Dave's alluded to it. It's been part of the annual plan since 2008, part of the High Street revitalisation, and a significant amount of work has already been done on the tracks. We understand 220, what it did to us in delays. However, the 2021 date continues to change. We appear to be now looking at a 2022 completion. What I'm here to talk or suggest is, please don't let it drop off your radar. The extension into that salt district is the last part of our tram route. It will bring much needed custom to this part of the city. It supports our distributing visitors to all parts of the city theme, and it will deliver guests into the stadium bound by Madras, Tuam, Cashel and Barbados. We will service the tram stop at Poplar Street. We will offer pre-hosting, delivering guests to the stadium area efficiently and avoiding traffic congestion. The next part is tram infrastructure. So we have a strong relationship with the council and have done for many, many years to ongoing track maintenance, which must continue, and it includes track repairs, overhead lines, tree clearance, point works, drainage, and we undertake track cleaning on a regular basis. At this time of the year, with autumn leaves, far more diligent than in the summer when we don't have it. Included in this is health and safety, an integral part of what we do. Our ongoing financial and personal commitment to this is significant. My comment to you is, please do not underestimate the importance of ongoing maintenance in the city of the tram infrastructure. Without it, we're unable to operate, and we then run, we, plural, or two of us, run risks of health and safety incidents. So Christchurch, a revitalised city. I'm a returnee, one of the many that have come back to Christchurch having lived away for 30 years. The city that I'm in now is very different to the city that I left, having gone to school in the inner city. I talk about a revitalised city because that is what Christchurch NZ talk about. So the tram navigates the city, and as you can appreciate, at a very slow pace. It highlights the areas that do not deliver on our positioning. Cathedral Square, limited recycling options, cracked tiles, toilets in odd places, tram shelters that are in need of repair, the many open car parks and spaces, and of course our less fortunate people that are drawn to the inner city. We all, including us, have a commitment to the city revitalisation. We are not a city of sameness. We are a city that is unique within New Zealand, and our offering should and must reflect that. So, what will make us unmissable? The don't stop part. Significant infrastructure commitment that the council have made to the stadium, to Pai Convention Centre, the sports centre, the arts precinct, the Anglican Cathedral, the Catholic Quarter. Fantastic transport infrastructure and options into and around the city. A walkable city, great hotels, precincts. Many of these are public funded, many are partnership, many are private funded. What that offers is something completely unique within New Zealand. When our events are in town, the city and the region benefits. Food and beverage, shops, local attractions, the trams, of course. Local suppliers of goods and services, Aramanga, the flower grower in Heathcote Valley, Greystone Wines from Waipara, Shipleys, who deliver the audio-visual within the conference centres. Conferences bring knowledge, exchange and ongoing investment into our region. Never underestimate the value of this investment to the ongoing region in the city. So some quick background on the trams: 26 years on the track, 7 trams. A day pass, hop on, hop off, 17 stops. We talk to Māori culture, English settlers, explorers and earthquakes. Restaurant tram, we engage with the local business community. Father Christmas on the Valentine's windows. City Mission, Christmas collection in the square. Pride, the tram carried dignitaries along the Cashel Wall to the Rainbow Crossing. Ronald McDonald House. We also engage with the locals. We have a wonderful annual pass at a significantly discounted rate, and I see I'm out of time, Andrew.
Well, thank you very much indeed for the written submission, for coming along to present to us this morning. Some points very well made and well understood. So thanks very much indeed, Sue, for your time.
Thank you all.
Thank you. So next I would invite Cherie Taylor to the table. Good morning. Thank you for coming along, and you've got 3 minutes to present this morning. Thank you.
I just am here to talk about the fast-track disposal of the land up by hunters. I've been a member of... sorry, I've never talked in front of a panel like this before, so please excuse. Everything I'm saying is from the heart and what I believe should be the correct avenues to be taken for the land. I've lived in the community for 8 years, and it really is a community. And one thing I feel that if the land is fast-tracked without a lot of consultation, that that community feel is going to be lost. And I had a look through the draft for the climate change that you guys are working through at the moment. And I really feel that a lot of those things have... The thing that I really got from the draft from the climate change is for us to progress, and I understand that there's a massive need for housing, but at what cost? We're in a state of climate emergency here, and I feel that this document really highlighted how that we should engage with community. We really should, before you continue with any big developments or land disposal. And I feel that if that land is fast-tracked without all that public consultation, that, that just totally wipes out all the things that you're proposing in this climate change document. There's been a lot of work from the local community and maintaining and establishing all those tracks and gullies within that area, and I believe at the moment they're not protected as well. And there's loads of things like when you change the land use, about how that impacts on those gullies as well. For the first time in a long time, tuis are being recorded on the Facebook page, and I really feel that if a lot of those things and impact stuff is not taken into consideration, that those areas are potentially going to be really damaged and lost. There's a lot of other stuff that, the roads are really under a lot of impact and stress at the moment. Just living in the local area, you can understand that. It's going to cause heightened traffic, all those kind of things. The runoff of the land as well, like I said before, is just going to impact massively on those special features of the land. So I think that's about it, really. I've never really made a kind of submission before, but
we're pleased that you've taken the time to come along and speak from the heart to do that. I mean, it's always good to hear from people in the communities that are affected by the proposals that we put forward. Yours is one of a number of submissions on that exact matter, the proposed disposal of the land at Hunters Road in Diamond Harbour. A number of Diamond Harbour associations have come along and spoken to that, and you're one of a number of residents who have done exactly what you did and came and spoke from the heart with their local knowledge to tell us exactly what they think about the proposal that we've put forward. So thanks for taking the time to do that this morning. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now moving to our next submitter, John Verd from Fluoride Free New Zealand. And John, you've got 5 minutes to present to us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm John Verd. I moved here with my family from our sister city of Seattle over 6 years ago. Professionally, I've owned a gym, been a fitness instructor, club manager, and otherwise involved in the fitness industry for over 20 years. Naturally, I've had a vested interest in all aspects of fitness, nutrition, and general health. As a resident of Christchurch and voting member of the public, I appreciate the opportunity to express the views of myself and a good number of people I know regarding the artificial fluoridation of our public drinking water. We love living here for all the same reasons that Kiwis should be proud of Aotearoa, and I hope that pure, unadulterated drinking water will continue to be one of those reasons. It is imperative that our local councils represent the views of their communities, especially on issues affecting their health, both negatively and positively. While the bill to fluoridate is proposed as a health benefit, it still does not mean that it should be implemented without public consent, and there is precedent that this is indeed a concern to New Zealanders. Today, I would like to address 6 basic issues not being addressed when the government sets out to move decision-making on fluoridation solely to the Director General of Health. Number 1, the public has the right of informed consent with regard to public resources affecting their health. I would like to cite from an NIH abstract on PubMed.gov by authors Douglas W. Cross and Robert J. Canton. Quote, silica fluorides widely used in water fluoridation are unlicensed medicinal substances administered to large populations without informed consent or supervision by a qualified medical practitioner. Fluoridation fails the test of reliability and specificity, and lacking toxicity testing of silica fluorides constitutes unlawful medical research. It is banned in most of Europe. European Union human rights legislation makes it illegal. Silica fluorides have never been submitted to the US FDA for approval as medicines, and the ethical validity of fluoridation policy does not stand up to the scrutiny relative to the Nuremberg Code and other codes of medical ethics, including the Council of Europe's Biomedical Convention of 1999, end quote. Number 2, apart from moral or ethical concerns, public water fluoridation is a medical intervention unequally applied to an entire population, regardless of any individual assessment or need. Dosages cannot be controlled for by age, weight, frequency, and quantity ingested for a hoped-for benefit. Further, the regulation of the amount in parts per million is based on a maximum safe limits for toxicity, not for dental efficacy. So even establishment proponents must admit this as a tacit acknowledgement of the inherent risk associated with the practice, which in any other circumstance might more accurately be called malpractice. Number 3, the public has a right to be informed as to the chemical nature and source of fluoride proposed to be injected into their water, just as much as they can expect on the packaging of any other food, beverage, or medicine they ingest. If I may quote an article from the New Zealand Institute of Chemistry, water fluoridation, quote, is usually done with one of 3 fluoride-containing chemicals, sodium fluoride, sodium fluorosilicate, and hydrofluorosilicic acid. But this article focuses on hydrofluorosilicic acid, as that is the chemical most commonly used in New Zealand for this purpose, end quote. Auckland-based company Ixom is one of a number of fluoride suppliers in New Zealand. They euphemistically call it a naturally occurring co-product of the superphosphate fertilizer manufacturing process. But it is, in fact, a waste product of the phosphate fertilizer industry. Hydrofluorosilicic acid meets the criteria for classification as a hazardous waste owing to toxicity, reactivity, and corrosivity under 42 United States Code Section 6901. Former Vice President and Senior Chemist at the United States Environmental Protection Agency headquarters, Dr. William Hersey, had this to say about it, quote, if this stuff gets out into the air, it's a pollutant. If it gets into the river, it's a pollutant. If it gets into the lake, it's a pollutant. But if it goes straight into your drinking water system, it's not a pollutant. That's amazing, end quote. Owing to the high costs of disposal, it is not surprising that these industries would be eager to turn this expense into a resource or a source of income by selling it to municipalities. Collectively, this makes our public water supply systems a hazardous waste disposal system for these products. Before legislation is advanced any further, we request that the Council disclose the source, supplier, and chemical composition of the fluoride additives proposed for use in our water. Number 4, scientific reviews show that water fluoridation may not effectively prevent cavities. I'll quote from an article in Newsweek magazine from June 29, 2015, where they found that fluoridation does not reduce cavities to a statistically significant degree in permanent teeth, says study co-author Anne-Marie Glennie, a health science researcher at Manchester University in the United Kingdom.
Now, I am going to need to draw this to a close, unfortunately, because we're at the end of the 5 minutes. This isn't a matter of decision-making for council, as you would understand, although it is a matter of interest to us as local elected members, and in the same way as it's a matter of interest to our community. But it's not something that actually forms a part of our council long-term plan.
That's why I'm proposing that it be brought back to the council.
Yep.
For submission to the public.
Indeed. All right. Look, thank you very much indeed for coming along and presenting to us this morning. We've got your written submission, which makes the points very, very clear, and of course you've added to that this morning as well. Something here that you'd like circulated?
Yep.
Yep, we can have our staff do that as well. No problem at all. All right. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now moving to our next submitter, Julian Falloon, representing Sport Canterbury. Julian, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
And Kevin Collier.
And you've got 5 minutes to present this morning.
E nanga mana, e nanga reo, e rau rangatira mā tēnā koutou. Te manawa whanua, tēnei rauhea, tēnā koutou. Ki aku rangatira o te kanihira o te Waitaha, nōku te mai Māori e. Ko Julian Falloon tōku ahau, ka oti te moaki o Sport Canterbury. Ki nui ake, ki kaha ake, te tokamoka ake. As I said in my brief, mihi, our vision is more people, more active, more often. And everything we do is about getting and keeping people engaged in sport and physical activity. And I guess I've been in front of you as a council enough to appreciate and understand how much you value the contribution of sport and physical activity to the well-being of our local community. And as a result, we acknowledge your continued investment into sport and recreation across many areas during some extremely challenging economic times. And while council have had to tighten its belt fiscally, sport and active recreation and play have fared pretty well within the draft LTP. As always, Sport Canterbury seeks to maintain our independence, and while working with councils to achieve the best outcomes for the sport and rec sector, our commentary of this submission is of the views of Sport Canterbury and don't necessarily represent any individual or organisation. From a regional approach to facility planning and delivery, Sport Canterbury is currently reviewing our regional spaces and places plans, and we hope these plans will continue to benefit councils when considering investment into sport, active rec and play facilities in the future. A number of key projects have been identified within your LTP, and we continue to work closely with Nigel Cox and his team here to ensure projects are not only incorporated but also prioritised. And in terms of facilities, Sport Canterbury commends the Council for ongoing investment into the maintenance of fit for purpose sport and recreation facilities, and we look forward to the completion of the Parakiori Recreation and Sports Centre. And we also support Council's prioritisation of the development of the athletics training facility at Ngā Te Pou Toitoi Linwood Pool and Hornby's Pool Library and Customer Services Facility. While the decommissioning of Whananui Pool will be a loss to local community, we understand the rationale for this and support the completion of Parakiori and the early development of the new Hornby Pool to provide alternatives for the residents of Riccarton. We commend Council for your support to date of the development of the Netzel Indoor Court facility and advocate for Council's continue to support this project through to its completion. From a parks perspective, we support Council's ongoing investment into sports fields and advocate that Council continues to maintain the quality of fields to at least its current level. We also advocate for continued planning to develop high-level artificial sports turf, and we think that we need to take time to plan for the home of future football, as well as Denton Park outdoor velodrome, and this should be prioritised within this LTP. In terms of active recreation and play, Sport Canterbury supports Council's commitment to investment in a number of initiatives, including the Otakaro Avon River Regeneration Program, particularly to enhance safety and enjoyment for on-river users, the continued improvement of existing footpaths and cycleways and the delivery of major cycle routes to support not only active transport but active recreation as well. And finally, parks, your continued commitment to developing parks and offshore maintenance and improvements. And also we implored the Council's commitment to investment in both destination and neighbourhood play spaces. And finally, Council, we applaud you for your continued investment into strengthening communities. And being a recipient of this fund ourselves, we've been able to continue to provide vital capability and development support to many sports organisations across the city, particularly through the very trying times caused by COVID-19. And as I highlighted to you at the end of 2020, my board, and in partnership with the Rata Foundation, are still fully committed to complementing this fund with resource to continue to strengthen organisations with a view of future-proofing our sector. Ngā mihi nui, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That leaves time for questions. James.
Kia ora, Julian. Look, can you confirm that I heard right? Sport Canterbury doesn't support the retention of the Wharenui pool?
I think with Parakiori providing a significant aquatics facility and then you developing Hornby, it's just a matter of the scale of the network. And while it's a disappointment for the local community, I think in terms of a network provision perspective, once Parakiori opens and your provision for the planning for Hornby, aquatics facility should suffice.
So has Sport Canterbury spoken with Wharenui Swimming Club?
No.
Because we've had a lot of support for retention of it. I just think that it's important that you have that conversation with them.
All right, thank you. I'll take one further quick question from Yanni.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. I'm just trying to understand, you've got a Spaces and Places plan that was kind of done after the earthquake. Is there a process for that to come to council to adopt, consider, reflect on the recommendations? And I guess I'm just trying to understand the timing of that document not coming to us ahead of our LTP, so that we don't have any relationship between what you're sort of putting forward from a strategic point of view to the budget considerations.
Yeah, we can offer a draft. One of the challenges that we've had with Sport New Zealand is that they wanted a regional Spaces and Places plan across the Canterbury West Coast region. So we've reviewed our current Christchurch plan, and we have a number of projects that we've worked with Nigel Cox to identify within the Christchurch City Council metropolitan area, and we're trying to incorporate into one planning document for South Canterbury. So we have got a draft, and we can offer that through your staff if you wish.
And maybe just a point of clarification if I can too. So the previous plan was through the Greater Christchurch Committee, I think it's called. Sorry, was taken through that group. This update is in draft form, is what Julian's saying. Yep. So if you remember back in 2017, yep, it was gone through the Greater Christchurch Committee, I think you call it. Yep.
All right, I'm going to need to draw this to a close because we're well over the 5 minutes. But look, thank you very much indeed for the written submission presenting to us this morning and for the answers to questions as well. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. So our next submitter is Helen Tate. Helen, thank you for joining us. And you've got 3 minutes to present to us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. I did submit on several topics in relation to the long-term plan, but because of the time limitation, I'm only going to speak to the one that I feel most strongly about, and that's the proposal to reduce library hours, library services more widely, but particularly the library hours. And I want to draw your attention to the Council's own objectives of providing equality of access. I'll just quote the exact words because they're very nice words. Ensure equitable access and inclusion and quality opportunities by managing affordability, locality and accessibility. And it's those last words that I'm concerned about. Page 58 of the draft plan sets out the proposal for reducing library hours. On the basis that it says we've looked at when our libraries are at their busiest and when we can reduce opening hours with minimal impact on how and when residents like to use their local library. And it also notes these changes would also mean that library opening hours are more consistent across the city. Well, yes, they are more consistent. They're consistently closed. So people will have the certainty of knowing they can't get library services rather than having to check on which libraries might be open to suit them. The proposals will have no community libraries open after 6 o'clock, and Tūranga only open until 7 o'clock. And this means that for families who want to bring young children to the libraries, or for students who don't have suitable study capability at home, or for business people who can only use the library in evening hours for either business research or their own recreational reading, that they'll have no opportunity to use any of the city's libraries. And I have some, I think, capability to speak on library matters. I've, in the distant past, been a manager of public library services for more than 20 years, including Auckland City Libraries and the State Library of Victoria. But my concern is, just as a Christchurch resident and knowing the proud history of public library service that Christchurch has, it's been regarded not just as a national leader but an international leader in provision of public library service. And I just see this as an extremely disappointing reduction in service. The point about minimal impact, it might be a minimal impact in terms of numbers, but the people who will be impacted are key members of the community who need those public library services more than anybody else and who can benefit from them. So I think a numbers game is a bit of a nonsense in this case. And you're also proposing to close 2 of the smaller libraries at Aranui and Sumner, one serving a particularly disadvantaged community and the other one distant from other library services. And at the same time as you're stopping people from getting to a physical library, reducing the online fingertip library service to be provided on weekdays only. So I strongly urge you to reconsider what you're doing in not living up to your own stated goals of providing access and accessibility to all of the citizens of Christchurch.
Thank you very much. A very clear submission. Thanks for coming along and speaking to it. You're one of a number of people that's brought us almost exactly that same message. So thank you very much indeed for doing so. Thank you.
I know how busy councillors are and how much you've got to read, so I've got a slightly reduced version of what I said that I'm...
Our staff will be able to distribute that for you, and we'll certainly be reading it. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you. All right, so then moving on to our next submitter. We have Nairi Bacon. Nairi? Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the table.
Thank you. In many countries, water is classed as the new gold, and in Wall Street, water has now joined oil and gold as a traded commodity. In spite of this, Council has said it has no power to make water bottling companies pay a levy for the millions of litres of water they take from Christchurch aquifers and export. Laws can and do get changed. Why has the Council not made this matter an urgent priority, ensuring companies such as these are also contributing to Christchurch's infrastructure? The question must also be asked, are Christchurch ratepayers now being asked to pay for water to compensate for the water now being taken by these companies? The draft long-term plan document makes mention of how COVID-19 has affected City Council finances, but completely disregards the financial impact COVID has had on its ratepayers, including, in many cases, job losses, hours reduced, or pay reductions. In spite of the COVID lockdown, chief executives of City Council-owned companies were granted obscene amounts of money in performance bonuses, and Council approved a $39 million project to construct a new building for the Court Theatre. the manner in which 750 hectares of land in Taurus was purchased by the council at a cost of 45 million at best can only be described as devious. Again, this money should have been spent on Christchurch infrastructure. In conclusion, the suggestion of rates being pushed up to 47.8% by 2031 is absolutely outrageous. This is not a council who needs to put up rates to anywhere near this level. This is a council who needs budgeting advice.
All right, thank you very much indeed for the submission. That neatly brings us to the end of the time, but some points very well made, and thank you very much for coming along and doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next submitter, Stuart McKinley, representing Southern Capital Limited. Now I'm guessing that none of you is Stuart.
No. Good morning. My name is Laura Dance. I'm a resource management planner at Elliott Sinclair. And with me, I have Claire McKeever, who is senior planner and team leader. Stuart sends his apologies. He was not able to make it today. So we are presenting on his behalf.
All right. Thank you very much. And you've got 5 minutes to do so. Thank you.
So we are presenting today on behalf of Stuart McKinley's submission for Southern Capital. We assume that you have read their submission, so we're going to talk to some of the points made within the submission. We are talking about the land they own at Nathan Place. They own 1 Nathan Place and 11 Nathan Place. This is industrial land located to the north of the airport. The submission made was to strongly oppose the land drainage rate. In the letter dated 30th of March 2021, it stated that council are proposing to rate all rateable properties in the district for land drainage because they believe that this is fairer. However, Southern Capital do not believe that this is fairer because they already have their own stormwater, land drainage and flood mitigation in place. Council currently do not know which areas are serviced by the land drainage system, so a blanket rate across all properties is not considered fair. The land at Nathan Place is not serviced by any council systems. It has its own on-site stormwater and roading, ECAN consents, and with that, much ongoing maintenance. And this all comes at a significant cost to the client. They have spent approximately $1.3 million so far in stormwater pipework, sumps, swales, filters, hardstand paving, curbs, guttering. That is just the construction costs. That is not even the consenting or the ongoing maintenance that goes with it. Therefore, the increase in land drainage rate would be approximately $2,500 per year for these 2 properties, with no change proposed to the level of service. Further, there is an additional proposed business rate increase of another $2,500 for the properties. So, in conclusion, Southern Capital do not consider this fair, as they will be rated for the service that they are not receiving. In the letter dated 30th of March, there was some alternative options, and we believe that alternative option 1 that would rate the properties that receive the land drainage service, and therefore those that receive the service have to pay for it. We believe that is the most fair outcome.
All right, thank you. Yours is one of, again, a number of submissions that we've received on exactly this matter. So thank you for the letter that we've got in front of us and also for the submission this morning. You have left us time for some questions, if indeed there are questions on this. Jimmy.
Just one question you particularly mentioned, because those kind of infrastructure, those already provided. But if pay the property for $2,500, you need to connect it to each household who will pay. Each household, they connect you. Because provide those infrastructure service to each household.
So this property at 1 and Nathan Place is an industrial property.
Yes.
So it
also has its own historic landfill issues. So from a stormwater perspective, they are not able to connect to council's system and must have their own anyway. Council's own global stormwater disposal consents, which the council gets from ECAN, does not enable the council to take stormwater drainage from properties that have any potential contamination. So Southern Capital Limited are in the situation where they must have their own on-site consents from Environment Canterbury to deal with, to treat and dispose of to ground their stormwater from their whole property, and that includes everything that's hard stand, everything that's roof, everything else. So the cost of the infrastructure to do that takes up a lot of space, and as you can appreciate, takes up a very large cost of money to do that, as well as the ongoing requirement for them to individually meet their ECAN requirements under their existing resource consents. The consent that they have for stormwater disposal from the site lasts till 2053, so the land drainage rate to contribute to a drainage system that they can't use, or roading around the site that they also don't use or provide any stormwater to, doesn't seem particularly fair in that particular situation. And so that's really the submission, is that the council infrastructure that houses and other parts of the city connect to is not something this site can use and must do its own thing.
Thank you.
Yeah?
All right, thank you very much indeed for the submission this morning. Some points well made. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So now we move to our last submitter before the morning tea break. I'd invite Peter Dryberg to the table.
Thank you. Peter Dryberg.
Thank you, and my apologies for pronouncing your name incorrectly.
It's frequently coming out very differently, so do not fret. Greetings, Deputy Mayor, Mr Turner and councillors. My online submission didn't work very well, so this is follow-up to clarify points. And the first point I'd like to make is to congratulate the council on the achievement of reinstatement of the Edmonds Band Rotunda, which looks very good. Thank you. Apart from that, I'm here to specifically support and encourage the council to follow up with the heritage targeted rate, in particular the first one of those set out at page 38 of the long-term plan, which would deal with the Canterbury Provincial Council building, the old municipal chambers in Worcester Street, the Robert McDougall Art Gallery, and also the Canterbury Museum development. The other, as I understand it, the other proposed targeted rate set out at page 39 of the plan would deal with the much-loved Art Centre. And there's a bit of a concern to me that without the sort of council support that has been provided for the Arts Centre, it may be left begging. And it's such a success story for Christchurch and such an important part of our identity that I don't think it should be left begging. So I definitely encourage the uptake of the proposed targeted rates, not from the point of view of the ratepayer bank account, but from the point of view of really what's very important for the city. My concern, in a way, in a broader sense, about any of these heritage issues is that many of us have waited a long time sitting back thinking, well, after the earthquake, the city's got many other priorities to deal with, many of them very costly. We're aware that there's a desire not to have rates go up too much, and I certainly support that theme. On the other hand, I think those of us who have waited back for these other priorities to be addressed, we've waited long enough. We don't want these heritage issues to be left behind and ignored, because we do believe, putting it in a nutshell, that they're extremely important to our identity, sense of place. You know, we want to be a new, modern, high-tech city, but we also want the places from which we've come to be visible, tangible, and there to help tell the story. Now, I also would like to encourage the council having a heritage incentive grant fund that works properly. I understand that in the past there's been about $700,000 annually allocated to that fund, and particularly in light of the fact that the council's recently adopted a very community-oriented heritage strategy, it's my submission that it's very important that some of that carrot method to encourage people is still in place, and it's certainly clear that some private interests have done a great deal for the city in reinstating buildings in places like the Public Trust and so on, where there's been some assistance from a heritage incentive fund. So we'd like to see that still there. 700,000 seems reasonably modest, but it's something to help people who want to do the right thing with heritage.
Indeed. I'm going to need to bring this to a close because we're beyond the end of the 3 minutes. Right. Again, the submission points are very clear, and we've heard from a number of other submitters in a very similar vein as well. Clearly, some strong support for the things that you're talking about there.
I'm really supporting the Historic Places Canterbury submission, and I'd like to direct the councillors and you, sir, to the part of the attachment at the back which emphasised the importance of heritage to the economy. That's in the last pages attached to the Historic Places Canterbury submission.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to come along this morning. Thank you. All right. So that now brings us just a minute over into our morning tea break. So I'll adjourn the meeting until 11:15. But if we can, please start on time at 11:15 with the next batch of submissions. Thank you. meeting, and we now move into the period after the morning tea break. Our next submitter is Suki Thompson. So Suki, good morning. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the table. Now, Suki is presenting on behalf of two different groups. So the first group is the Banks Peninsula Native Forest Climate Change Group. So, Suki, there are two submissions for this one, which add up to a total of 10 minutes. So if we do those two first, and I'm happy just to give 10 minutes, and how you use that 10 minutes across the two submissions is entirely your choice. And then we'll move to the submissions from the Rod Donald Trust. So if we can start with 10 minutes from the Banks Peninsula Native Forest Climate Change Group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you, councillors, for having us to present today. With me is Bob Webster, also a member of the Banks Peninsula Native Forest Climate Change Group. Now, this group is an informal collaboration of experts from a whole range of organisations. We've listed those organisations on the front of our submission. You'll notice that there are staff from CCC and ECAN involved with the group. They have not been involved with preparing these submissions to the long-term plan and your own climate change strategy. The aim of the group is to find ways to incentivise a change in marginal land use from farming to native forest, in particular through improvements to the emissions trading scheme, so that setting aside land for carbon sequestration in native forest becomes a financially viable alternative to pastoral farming and rotational exotic forestry. And we want to expand the current situation where these activities are only carried out by government organisations or private philanthropists to actually be an economic use in their own right. And we see Banks Peninsula as offering real low-hanging fruit because it has so much marginal land on it that is suitable for native forest and that is just naturally regenerating if it's allowed to get on with it. So we have made substantial submissions already to the Emissions Trading Scheme and the Climate Change Commission draft advice to try and remove some of the systemic barriers that are sitting there preventing private landowners from just putting all this marginal land into the Emissions Trading Scheme. And where we see the council coming in now is that the Climate Change Commission in its draft advice has made it clear that work must start now for this transformation and the lasting changes needed across society. And it's identified that permanent native forest has got a really important role in reducing those carbon or absorbing those carbon emissions that we cannot reduce to zero. So our position is that we very strongly support your climate change strategy that you've developed, and in particular Program 5, Carbon Removal and Natural Restoration. And we see that harvesting this low-hanging fruit on Banks Peninsula would be a real win-win for biodiversity, climate change, and the economy, and a way for you to start enacting your climate change strategy right away. And we need that action now because forests take time to grow, and if they're going to be effectively sequestering as much of our residual emissions as possible by 2050, they need to be at their peak absorption capacity by then, which means they need to get going now. And what we focused on our submission is low-cost ways that you can make big gains through supporting initiatives that are already underway. This can occur now. It doesn't need the council to do further strategy work. So this is why we've tied together our climate change strategy and our LTP strategy, because what we're saying to you is get on with implementing that climate change strategy in your LTP right now. The way that we see Program 5 can start to be being really easily implemented just at the stroke of a pen here at this table is by increasing the funding for the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, our sister organisation that works with private philanthropic landowners to assist them to set aside land for conservation. We've asked for an extra $50,000 operating costs for the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust. We've also asked for $60,000 for the pest-free Banks Peninsula. Keeping pests down in these naturally regenerating areas really helps the growth of the forest and therefore the sequestration. We do note that the pest-free Banks Peninsula group asked for a bigger amount than that, and we would change our submission to reflect what they have asked for. We're also asking for the biodiversity fund to be increased. Now, this is the one that helps private landowners principally with fencing. It's very efficiently used with the Conservation Trust and the QE2 Trust working together on how it's allocated out. And it's held up in your own climate change strategy as an example of something that's already happening now. So we're a bit upset when we open the LTP to find that this precious fund, which is a very small amount of only 200,000 a year anyway, is actually being cut to 190. What kind of signal is that sending? So what we're saying is, actually, we want you to double the original value of that, bring it up to 400k per year. This would enable the covenanting organisations to process a lot more covenants through a lot faster. So those are things you can do to help initiatives that are already going on. And the final thing we're asking is to set aside funds for the acquisition of land. There are large blocks of land out there on Banks Peninsula that could be grabbed now or grabbed when they come on the market that would provide sequestration opportunities for Christchurch City and for Christchurch City Council, that would also support your biodiversity aims. You just need to be in a position to be able to buy them. If you think it's too complicated or difficult for the council to buy them, then we see the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust as a very effective vessel to funnel those funds to, because it is nimble enough to be able to deal with things like deadline sales, where you have to get an offer in, you know, within a 4-week period, which is something that's beyond what the council can probably do. And we didn't put a figure in our submission, but we just said, look, what if you put aside $500,000 per year into this fund? That would allow at least 1,000 extra hectares to be added to that conservation estate over the next 10 years. And we would be aiming to buy blocks, or we're asking you to aim to buy blocks where natural regeneration is already underway, because it is just so much more effective for landscape scale afforestation to harness the power of nature, as has been done at Henawai, than to start running around planting. Planting's great for community groups and small plots of land, but not for landscape scale change. And what we're saying is, if you're outsourcing the work with grants to community organisations, it's not putting an extra burden on council staff. It's not difficult to do. All you've got to do is increase those figures. And we have worked out, and this is, you know, these are pretty rough figures, but we've worked out that what we've asked for would increase your LTP budget by 0.6%, and that includes squirreling away that money for land acquisition as well. So we submit these are very minor budget changes that would enable you to start delivering on your climate change strategy right away. You'll be able to answer those people who completed the survey and say, yeah, we are doing something right now. So thank you. Open for questions.
All right, thank you very much indeed. So that does leave almost 3 minutes for questions. Are there questions for Suki on these matters? All right, so no questions. Thank you very much indeed. Is there anything else that you wanted to add with the time that you've got left available?
I could just add that I think it sort of seems to me like there's a machine here already to get some of the outcomes that your council wants in terms of, and the community wants in terms of ecological restoration and protection and carbon sequestration. And you've got the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust and the Rod Donald Trust here set up specifically achieving those objectives which the council has got. All you need to do is put the money in, press the button, and it's happening. So it's not a big not a big outlay in terms of work within the council to achieve these things.
All right, thank you very much indeed. So now let's move on, Suki, to the Rod Donald Trust submissions. So you've got one on climate change, one on the long-term plan, and one on the development contributions policy. That adds up to a total of 15 minutes. And my understanding is that we're also going to bring Maureen McCloy and Paul McNoe to the table to support you in those submissions as well.
Yes, thank you. Maureen and Paul will present our climate change and long-term plan, and I'll handle the development contribution policy. So, yeah, I'll just shuffle over a bit.
Great, thank you very much. Maureen, Paul, good morning, good to see you.
Kia ora, Andrew.
Hi, thanks for having us. I'm Maureen McCloy, I'm the chair of the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust. Paul McNoe is one of our trustees. We noted the article in the press yesterday that city residents, their number one desire is protection of the environment. You know, they're looking for leadership, and as the council, you are well placed in relation to environment and climate leadership, and we submit that the Rod Donald Trust is well placed to help you, to assist you in delivering on offsetting climate change, restoration of ecosystems and biodiversity, as well as public access. Our absolute key message to you is thank you for believing in us, thank you for supporting us, thank you for your proposal to fund us. We are here, as Bob's just said, we're already here and we can be part of this solution. So I'm just going to hand over to Paul.
Thanks, Maureen. So the Rob Donald Trust was founded in 2010, just a bit back, as a CCO, so it's kind of your organisation working on your behalf. So our vision and approach is to to build environmental guardians of the future through improved public walking, biking access, improving biodiversity, and promoting knowledge, and working in partners with other groups within the Banks Peninsula who are of a similar frame of mind, if you like, so doing similar things. So Trust, the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, DOC, and a range of others. So we have demonstrated that we can provide cost-effective and efficient solutions to providing environmental solutions for the Banks Peninsula, and particularly those that are focused around climate change. We're very, our most recent purchase that's in train at the moment of Mount Bradley and Mount Herbert will change, will permanently create a park that is regenerating into a natural forest. So we particularly focus on your Program 5 for carbon removal and natural restoration. And from the Climate Change Commission, it's clear that the time to act in terms of impacting on making moves to improve reducing our carbon footprint is now and not for the future. And we think that Banks Peninsula provides that an opportunity to enact that today, to improve biodiversity, sequester carbon, and actually return some of the marginal land from grazing into the natural forest. So we strongly support the Council's draft climate change strategy and urge that there's adequate funding to ensure that is delivered. We also strongly support the new funding that's been proposed for Rod Donald Trust. We think that's excellent. We'd like to see that confirmed. We'd also like to see the continued funding for Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, the Biodiversity Fund, and the regional and community parks programs that are already committed. In addition to that, we'd like to ask for a financial contribution towards the capital and operating costs of the new Te Awa Pātaki park that we're in the process of establishing, and we're suggesting annually $50,000 in capital and $10,000 in operational budget. We'd also like to see more public funding and retention of existing lands for biodiversity and carbon sequestration and for low carbon activity, so walking and cycling and those things out on the peninsula. We'd like to see the integration of Banks Peninsula ecological vision into the Council's biodiversity work, and increased support for other groups and organisations that work together to deliver biodiversity across the Banks Peninsula. As convener of the Banks Peninsula Native Forest Climate Change Group, we support their submission to enact Program 5 through increased funding for Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust and its programs, increased budget for the Biodiversity Fund, land purchase for conservation, and some improvement around the regulations so there are real consequences of people destroying native forests without authorisation, and giving preference to reforestation of natural forest rather than planting of pines. I think that's that. Hand back to Maureen.
Thank you, Paul. So, as I said before, we want to thank the Council for recognising the value and the role of the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust as its CCO, the confidence that you've expressed in us with the grant funding that is proposed for the LTP. We also, that was worked up over a period of years. We want to thank staff members Kate Russell, Kay Holder, Calvin McMillan and Michael Down, who along with elected members participated in the joint work party that was set up in 2019, and what that did was analyse and report on the Trust's work to date and made recommendations about its future funding, and that's how we have got to where we are today. We support these funding grants. We are conscious that the Te Ahu Pātaki proposal, which I'll talk about in a minute, that will expend a significant amount of our funds. Things are going to be tight for us. If there's any way that that first capital injection could be brought forward by a year, that would be extremely helpful to us. We would appreciate that. We do support the proposal that you've just that Suki just spoke to in relation to the Native Forest Climate Change Group, putting funds aside annually for land acquisition on Banks Peninsula to meet those climate change reduction targets. I just want to say that the Rod Donald Trust is happy to be the vehicle for that. It's what we do. So we have a lot of expertise in purchasing land for conservation, and because of the way we work, we're able to move fast. So I'd just like to talk about Te Ahu Pātaki. As some of you will know, we have signed a sale and purchase agreement. We signed it in October to acquire 500 hectares of land above Littleton Harbour, including the two highest peaks of Christchurch territorial area, Mount Herbert, Te Ahu Pātaki and Mount Bradley. The agreement was unconditional and the purchase will complete on the 1st of July. We have met with staff, Mary Richardson and Dawn Baxendale. Thank you for the meeting, Dawn. Asking for the council to support us, possibly by a grant via the LPT, possibly by bringing forward the capital grant, possibly by making a $500,000 donation so that you become a Totara sponsor. Oh, yeah, that'd be nice, 50. The 50,000, thanks, Suki. What I was about to say is we have been publicly fundraising and we have had 500 members of the public have made donations. So you know when you start a project and you go, oh, that's a good idea. And what is awesome when there are 500 other people in Canterbury have said, actually, I agree. And they have made donations. Alton Bradley Park have been incredibly generous in this. They sold a waterfront section in Chartres Bay, and they have pledged a significant amount of fund towards the purchase. We have developed a really strong relationship with Ngāti Whiki through this process, and we believe that we will be able to develop a co-ownership, co-governance model with them and Alton Bradley. We have also pledged a significant sum and we are bearing the cost of buying the land and the admin cost of buying the land and setting up the park. So we are slightly short of our fundraising goal of 1.5 million, but what I want to tell you, because we're very excited about this, is that we are over 90% of the way there. We are absolutely delighted that we set out to raise 1.5 million and we are over 90% of the way there. We have had to have conversations with people when they've said to us, and so are the council on board with you, and are they putting funds into this? We always say, well, actually, the council supports the Rod Donald Trust, which you do. But if you could become a Totara sponsor, which is 50,000, that would be extremely helpful. The only other thing I really want to say in the time we have available is about the proposal to divest the Diamond Harbour land. We've noticed this, that because access is part of our remit, that there are several important public walking tracks used by the community and visitors, and there are significant biodiversity values in the gullies. This land is in council ownership, and we've read the submission prepared by Richard Suggett, who's one of the Rod Donald trustees, and we do support it in full. The community needs to be consulted, the climate change lens applied, and if you are going to sell it, we would be looking to maximise public gain in relation to biodiversity and public access through that process. In the meantime, there's a lot of work to be done there to ensure that it has public support, and we would encourage you to not list that as land for sale. So we asked the council to apply its climate change lens and what you can achieve with your climate change strategy. We believe this represents a good investment in your funds, enacts the wishes of the people, and is achieved if you do that via the Rod Donald Trust with no implications for increased staff costs, and send extremely positive signals that as the council you are serious about climate change commitments. It is important with climate change that it is owned and that it isn't othered. So that is something that we can help with that, because we are already working on the peninsula. So just before I hand over to Suki, just want to restate, thank you for your support, thank you for believing in us. We can be part of the solutions. I'm going to ask Suki to speak to the development contribution.
Thank you, Maureen. So just very quickly on that, we are concerned about your draft development contribution policy. First of all, we strongly support through our submission the acquisition of more land for regional or conservation parks, and at the moment you're removing from the development contribution that piece that would go in there. Now that's what helps the money flow to the Parks Department keep pace with development, so we think it's really important that stays in there. We also found the development contribution policy pretty obtuse to read and very unclear about when the development contributions would apply and when they wouldn't. So we've provided some replacement wording that we suggest would make it much more clear to people when it applies and when it doesn't. And then we did want to flag that we ourselves carried out a subdivision a few years ago, which was to protect public walking access on a track. We bought the land to protect the access. We put a conservation covenant on the bush. We put an easement on the walking track. We subdivided the land. We on-sold it. Boy, it was not a straightforward process. And the whole development contribution thing we found we did not feel was being applied in the way that it was stated in the policy. And so we just want to say some subdivisions have got a public benefit aspect, and be very careful if you're jacking up the rate so high as you're proposing that you're not creating a perverse consequence in there. Happy to talk about that further with you, in a different forum. So thank you very much. I think we've got a few minutes left for questions.
Indeed, thank you very much indeed. Are there questions for the Rod Donald Trust team? Sarah.
Kia ora. Thank you so much for the submission and the work that you do. So just keep it crystal clear. So a $50,000 donation initially to become a total sponsor for the purchase, but actually $50,000 a year capex ongoing as well for the actual work. Was that additional? That was in the previous submission for you, kind of talking to yours though.
In relation to Te Ahu Pātaki, if the council could become a Totara sponsor with a $50,000 capex to contribute towards the purchase of it, and then $10,000.
Just the 10,000 OPEX. Okay.
Because one of the things, because this is a really important part. I always keep saying, this is not a patch of land over the back of Pariki.
Yeah, that's huge.
This is the top. Important. This is our highest peaks. So we've got to do this properly. And so it's one thing to buy it, and it's quite another thing to manage it in the respectful way that those mountains should be managed.
But you don't need ongoing capex, just the ongoing OPEX.
OPEX,
great.
Correct.
All right, and one further question from Anne.
Yeah, kia ora. I know that the foundation, the Christchurch Foundation, has been involved in helping you with the fundraising. Are they still involved? Are they still actively involved in? Yeah.
Yeah, so we use the Christchurch Foundation to provide that fundraising platform for us. We do take direct donations as well, but as the person who sits on the other end of that, I can tell you that the value you get from using a platform is massive, because I don't have to deal with these bank account numbers and writing receipts and all that stuff. So they've done a great job there for us, and they have also helped us to launch the whole project into the public domain. And yes, we are still working with them because our fundraising hasn't completed, and we are hoping that they will be going around their traps for us one more time as we go into the final straits. So we have had a good service from the Christchurch Foundation, and we have had all the money they've collected pays over once a month to the Rod Donald Trust.
Great.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed once again for coming along and presenting to us on a number of matters, and certainly amalgamating the time in the way that we have worked very well. So thanks very much indeed. Thank you. All right, so next we've got Jennifer Dalzell and Joanne Byrne from Shirley Road Central. We've got the petition on the hub that obviously sits alongside this presentation as well. So welcome back, and you have 5 minutes to make this presentation to us. Thank you.
Kia ora. I'm Jo Byrne, this is Jennifer Dalzell. We're from Shirley Road Central. You've seen many of us over the past few days, so we'll try and be brief today. You're well aware we've lost our community centre and that we want it back. We are still the lost suburbs of Christchurch, still waiting. This was from a Newsline story a few years back about celebrating the number of community centres rebuilt around Christchurch. And Mr Moses, a member of staff, said, "I've genuinely felt like we were rebuilding neighbourhoods. These are the places where people gather and connect as a community, and people really miss them after the quakes. We're still missing ours." These are examples of some of the expenditure around the city. And we've got some really incredible community facilities, and we're very lucky. We've just had the new centre open at St Albans, Kohinga. After 1 month, the centre is at capacity 3 evenings per week. They've had 4 new groups formed in that time already, and over 500 people have just called in. Prior to the earthquakes, they were having 30,000 people call into the centre over a year. You know, and we're now suffering community severance with the new CNC, unfortunately, and the impact on that on the community. And this is our site still at Shirley. We've got a pump track, a temporary pump track, and nothing else. It is an amazing location. This is a photo of the walkway alongside the Dudley Creek. It's absolutely beautiful and such an asset to the community that runs along the back of where we want our new community centre. We have got grand designs for this space, and we really hope that you're going to join us in this. We've spoken to you about how we can fund this. We think it's really manageable in this long-term plan. And we're going to talk briefly about our petition. So our petition is from another group which was called Where is Our Community Centre? And our work has sort of developed over the years since the last long-term plan when we started this work. We've now got over 1,200 signatures online and on our paper copies. This is the wording of our petition, that our community's lost our well-used and well-loved community centre at 10 Shirley Road following the earthquake. We need a new community facility to serve the wider communities of North Richmond, Shirley, Maraha, Edgware and St Albans, east of Cranford. And this is a wordle of the key messages on the petition, to save you all having to read them all. But you know, there's an overwhelming sense of loss in the community. We've got sadness. People want their community, they want a centre back. It was incredibly popular and well used before the earthquakes, and I think it will be again. You know, we've got so much infill housing and social housing going in the area. The population's just going to keep increasing. We've got huge population diversity, and we want a facility that will meet the need of everyone in our community. We'd like to say thank you for the support of both Poto and Duncan, who we've talked to about our work. And really, all we're here today is to ask for a bit of equity for our area. We need a box. We'd like quite a big box, but that's all we've come to ask for today. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. So we do have time for questions. Are there any questions on this? Mike.
Thank you. Thanks for your submission. It's really, really good. And I think you're idea of having a library and community centre combined within the Tenshirley Road is actually excellent and has merit. My question though is, obviously there's an existing library by the Palms. What do you think will happen if that library was moved and put into Tenshirley, the community around there that use it? Do you think they would go to?
Tenshirley Road is on 4 bus routes. We've had lots of people who signed the petition state that they find it hard to park near the library in the current position, and older people, they're having to park on top of the roof of the mall and then walk all the way down through the mall. So I think the new site would be far more accessible for far more people.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Pauline.
And I think that's a really attractive option too, if it was to come to fruition. But if that library option was not there, how then do you think we could, sort out funding for a centre there?
Well, I still think there's plenty of money to be made out of the sale of the excess properties on Hills Road and Slater Street, and from the developers' fees and the proceeds from all of the building that's happening in the area. It's just huge. It's going to get really, really busy. We're only 5k from town. It's such a great location, and instead of doing little pepper pot developments around the little suburbs, we'd rather have one decent facility to serve all of the areas that we've spoken about in our petition.
Right, and yesterday we had a comment from the Richmond Residents and Business Association, and they were not so, they had an opinion not to support a centre there. Are you guys kind of in conflict, or do you see that you could work together and there is a need for both?
I think we can be very complementary. We're really, really grateful for the support of the St Albans Residents Association in this process. They're really busy in their new centre. RRBA have got Avebury House running at capacity. There's been a new property acquired on Vogel Street that's also well used. There is such a shortage of facilities in our area, and I think it's really important that groups that are funded by council continue to support each other in the work that different groups do. It shouldn't be a competition, and if we've set up a system that puts community groups against each other, there's something really wrong with the systems out there.
Thank you. I am going to need to bring this to a close, unfortunately, because we are well over the 5 minutes. But thank you very much indeed for the presentation, and obviously the petition which is in front of us this morning as well. So thanks very much indeed for the time spent presenting to us this morning.
Lovely.
Thank you.
We don't want to be back in 3 years, so please see us.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our next submitter, Stu Bryce from Surf Life Saving New Zealand. Stu, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the table. And you've got 5 minutes to present to us this morning.
Thank you very much for your time today. And again, thank you very much for the historical support that the council's given Surf Life Saving across the Christchurch City area. On a day like today, we're probably not thinking about going to the beach, but there were people in the water today at Scarborough. Some of the dippers seem to get out there. It's 14 degrees, but probably warmer than being on the beach. We've submitted, and hopefully you've read it, is to support the Regional Guard program, which is the weekday state school primary program, which runs Monday to Friday throughout the school holidays. This program's been running for 30 plus years with the support of the council. In its original days, it started with a sole operator at each beach, and now it's down to teams of people making sure the beaches are safe across the area. Last month, through Christchurch, 7 clubs delivered over 16,000 patrol hours, and off that they saved 80 people with a possible impact of up to $320 million based on the statistical cost of a life. This should be a presentation just pop above you. So that's some of our stats from last year. The 7 clubs in Christchurch, we saved 83 lives and assisted 152 people. Without those, the assists may return to shore. There's a debate on how many else people get to shore. Off that, 26 people were saved in 20 minutes at Sumner on one day, so it was a pretty big day. 33 researchers, 163 first aids provided. And that's our piece to the resistance, is 0 drownings between the flags. The other beaches we have currently, we supplied service to through from mid-November through to mid-March, a weekend service which is delivered by the volunteers through those times, and a weekday service which is delivered with the support of the council. What we want to add is we want to add Scarborough. The development of Scarborough over the last 5 to 10 years post-earthquake with the development at the clock tower, the beaches which look over the water, and with the completion, and hopefully soon will be the completion of the coastal pathway. That will be the head of it. The problem we have is exactly the same as what the council has got when it rains. The beach has egressed, and we have beach from Hardwick Street. A number of years ago, through the top tidal range, it was wet. So people didn't sit there. Now it's a great beach to go to. That's a standard day down at Scarborough, which we're wanting to put a service on. At the moment, there is no service there. There's a service around the corner at Sumner, which is a busy service, like I mentioned before. So we're submitting to increase the grant we get to $397,000 to provide a 7-day-a-week service at Scarborough, and the service we currently have across the board as well. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Sarah?
Thanks so much for that, Stu. Just checking, this is the same way that the Surf Lifesaving set up around the country, isn't it? With sort of government support for the national organisation, and then council supporting the sort of school holiday,
100%.
actual paid stuff.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. James?
Kia ora, Stu. Thank you for thanking us.
That's right.
Firstly, has any thinking gone into the fact that, as you mentioned, there are 7 surf lifesaving clubs along the foreshore there, of consolidating them? I know that there are some with new club rooms and that, but has that ever been considered?
It was debated post-earthquake when we weren't sure of the stability of a lot of those clubs.
Right.
And the culture in those smaller communities. Yes, I understand there's 4 within a stretch quite close together, but the cultures are quite different. The communities are quite different. The biggest issue, or one of the issues we have, South Brighton, we don't know the numbers because for a number of years the road was directly out of South Brighton, and the last 3 years they've been building the club. So once that gets going again, the car park's reinstated, we don't know how many people will be attending there. They all hold a need, and the council supported some of those facilities, New Brighton and South. So there's all components there. North New Brighton has a significant playground, which affects us. The rollover from children from the skate park across the road to the beach is huge. So they all hold their own little niche. There's an American model, an Australian model, but they don't hold the culture, etc., the pathway.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Anne, and then Sarah, if there's time. Anne.
Thank you. Just wondering, thanks, Stu. Just wondering how does it work with government funding and local funding? How does that work?
Government funding came in for the first time last year, to be honest, thanks to COVID. And with the decrease in gaming turnover affected us dramatically. We've been pushing that for a number of years. The government funding at the moment for the Christchurch clubs is funding about 83% of the directly related life-saving cost. The project, the grant we're asking for covers about 7% of those costs for the clubs, and the clubs will cover 10% of the direct life-saving costs. That's not covering the cost of any sport programs or any other development programs they have or junior programs.
All right, thank you very much. That does bring us to the end of the time, but thank you very much indeed for coming along and talking to us today, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So our next submitter is Daryl Campbell from Dementia Canterbury. So Daryl and other people supporting you, welcome to the table this morning. Good to have you with us. And you've got 5 minutes for your presentation today.
Kia ora, I'm Diane Tuthel from Dementia Canterbury. We are opposing the reduction in funding for public programs at the Art Gallery. Since 2013, Dementia Canterbury and the Art Gallery have had a very positive and mutually beneficial partnership. Our clients participate in monthly activity groups at the gallery, including art tours and art making. These programs have been the subject of research and have received recognition both nationally and internationally. Those with dementia often feel excluded from communities, and these groups break down those barriers, reduce social isolation, and build self-confidence again. From a personal perspective, my dad once attended these groups. Because of his dementia, he became less involved in his community. Attending the groups at the gallery became very important to him. One of the very regular questions my dad used to ask me is, when is my next group? Engaging with art gave him such enjoyment alongside a sense of normality and connection. These groups reflect the heart of the Council's goals of building resilient communities and celebrating identity through art. On behalf of all our clients, I urge you to support groups like these to remain. They really do make a difference. I'm now going to hand over to two of our care partners, Beverly and Lester, who will also share about what the groups mean to them and their family member. Beverly.
Kia ora tātou. I'm a retired nurse who has worked in aged care facilities, so had some experience of dementia. Now I'm living with it as I share a house with my sister, who is 7 years older than I and has developed dementia. So the visits that are provided for us by Alzheimer's New Zealand are really our social life together. And the art gallery is especially important. I value the ease of access, obviously, with the car park and a lift, so that my sister, who tends to shuffle very slowly, doesn't have long to walk. But most of all, I really, really value the work that the staff put in. Each time we have a select number, say 2 or 3 pieces of art that have been selected by one of the gallery staff, and we have a good explanation of them, and things I have to admit that I probably would walk past and not take much notice of. I now have a new understanding of what the artist was thinking about when making that work. Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Lester Chisholm. My wife suffers from Parkinson's and dementia and has done so for some years. I'm her full-time carer. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to the Art Gallery and Dementia Canterbury for the programs that they offer. I just want to mention 3 aspects. First, stimulation. In my wife's case, stimulation is essential. She had an interest in arts. She's got a degree in art history. And the stimulation that these programs provide is immeasurable, due first, I think, to the quality of the programs and those organising them and the presenters, and secondly, because it takes place at the art gallery where the groups can see the art being spoken of. The second aspect is the group component. You'll probably all be aware that group activities are considered to be very beneficial for people suffering from dementia, and it is a joy to see those groups participating despite the dementia. It can only be beneficial for them. The third aspect is, from my point of view as a carer, I attend these sessions, and it is, of course, a joy for me to see my wife benefiting, but I have benefited enormously, and as I see it, the need for these sorts of services can only increase over the long term. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our submission.
All right, thank you very much indeed, and thanks for providing, really first-hand experience to support the point that you're making. That's incredibly useful. There is time for one question, if anybody's got a question. I think the information presented is very clear. Thanks very much indeed for coming along today.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so the next sequence of submissions, Suki Thompson, welcome back to the table. Now you've got, Suki, you've got 3 submissions that you're speaking to. The first is your own personal contribution, and then representing the Robinsons Bay Reserve Management Committee, and then the Garden of Tane. That gives a total of 13 minutes. I'll leave it to you how you want to manage the time within the 13 minutes. That's fine.
Yeah, thanks very much, Andrew. I did just ask when I came in to give my personal submission last, because my Reserve Management Committee submissions actually sort of inform my personal submission. Are you happy if I switch them around?
You've got 13 minutes.
I've got
13 Use it as
minutes.
you wish. That's
All
fine.
right, well, I'll do Robinsons Bay first, and then I'll ask Stefan Krauberger from Garden of Tane to come and join me, as we're both here for that one, and then I'll just do my personal submission. So in terms of the Robinsons Bay Reserve, I am now the chair of the Robinsons Bay Reserve Management Committee. That's fairly recent, but due to our member membership getting very elderly, I had to step up into that role. We would like to thank the council for the funding they've given to this reserve. We got a reserve management plan off the ground under the old Banks Peninsula District Council, and we got into the system early here with Christchurch City Council, and as a result there is now this lovely story trail in this reserve. I'm giving you a few pictures on the submission of the kind of exhibits and interp panels that are there. So really what we're asking you for is, first of all, if we don't manage to spend our budget this year, could we please carry over any remaining funds to make sure that we use them for the planting that is our final thing that we're doing. It's been very dry this year and we haven't been able to get on with that. But our really big concern is the ongoing maintenance. So a lot of capital money has gone into this place, but the maintenance is currently pretty terrible. And when we turn up there for things like our February neighbourhood week party, you know, the grass is this high. So a bunch of old ladies, I'm the youngest, we get out with our weed eaters and we cut it. We're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to use power tools in reserves, but of course we're good rural folks and we can all use a weed eater even if we're in our 80s. So off we go and do it. But really what we want to do is we want to get into a maintenance agreement with the council which sorts out what the council does and what the Reserve Management Committee does, and we are happy as volunteers to put in time to cutting tracks, mowing grass, whatever needs to be done, but we need to have that formalised arrangement with the council. And at the moment it's just all ad hoc and we don't know what, you know, who does what, and basically not much happens from the council side of things, so it's not a very satisfactory situation. So just the final thing I'd like to say is to thank our project manager Stephen Gray, who we've worked with, who has written the purchase orders out and you know, made sure the money flow happens and has been very helpful. So I'm happy to take questions on Robinson's Bay if you would like.
All right, so any questions on Robinson's Bay? Anne?
I think you know, the idea of a partnership, you know, working together with council and maintenance is a really good one. Have you kind of had a think about how that could work in terms of, would it be like a list and you do this bit and that bit, or how do you think it would work?
I think that's what we made a list in our submission of what we thought. We thought that the council ought to cut the tracks and mow the grass around the displays and trim the vegetation a couple of times a year. And then we would hold an annual working bee prior to the barbecue, tidy up, trim vegetation, clean signage, things like that. You know, basically things that we're supposed to be allowed to do as opposed to having to do other things that we're not supposed to be allowed to do. And to have it in a written agreement and to have it reviewed annually and to have a structure set up where reserve management committees are more fully embraced. And the other problem that we've got is that we aren't allowed to have a bank account anymore. Got $1,000 sitting on our old bank account because we've still got it. Our personnel has changed, like I've taken over, but we cannot meet the bank standards to change the account names. We've asked the council if we could give the money to them, would it be guaranteed for Robinson's Bay? No, so it's leaving us in the position where we're going to have to take it out in cash and keep it in an ice cream box under the bed. Not very good.
All right, and I mean, I know that's something that we've talked about at the community board for a long time. It's one that just needs to be sorted out.
Yeah, does.
Are there any further questions on Robinson's Bay? All right, so do you want to move on, Suki, to the next one? So this is Gardner Tane, and we'll just keep the clock, I was going to say, we'll just keep the clock running. That's all right.
So I'd just like to introduce Stefan Kraberger, who is also on the Garden of Tane Reserve Management Committee.
Hello, everyone.
So the Garden of Tane Reserve Management Plan was approved by the council in 2010, a bit of a hiatus after that, and the committee appointed in late 2012. So we've been running for 9 years now. What we took on as a committee was this huge area in Akaroa that was like the lost garden of Halligan, one of our members used to say, completely overgrown, tracks so muddy you could hardly walk on some of them. People didn't like going in there. They said it was too dark and gloomy, but totally beautiful place. And what we have done as a local committee is we have slowly nibbled away at that, and we are just about there now on enacting that reserve management plan. We had no budget assigned by the council to start with. We got a small budget by coming here and making submissions. Then we got a more generous budget after that. And what we've done sitting at our side out in Akaroa, we've done all the showing around of contractors. We've done all the setting out of what the jobs are that need to be done. We've done all the sequencing of how to achieve it. And then Stephen, who's been great, Stephen Gray again as our project manager back here in council, writing out the purchase orders. We then check, have the jobs been done properly, and let him know to authorise payment. So we have saved the council heaps of time and money coming out to Akaroa, but we also tackled this huge problem and project in a very steady and logical way, and we've tapped into local contractors and we've tapped into local knowledge, and we've done it in a way that's incredibly sympathetic with Akaroa, and now we are the venue for the premier event in Akaroa, Lumiere, that will be taking place on May the 22nd. So similar really to the Robinsons Bay submission. First of all, we'd like to thank you for the capital funding that you have given us, and we'd like to thank Stephen. We would like to support the ongoing budget that is in the long-term plan for the next couple of years, but we want to draw your attention to the fact that there's now 100k 10 years down the track in 2030. A big lump down there. That's not helpful for working and keeping a small committee like us motivated. We'd like to see that chunked out, 10k per year. That's enough for us to really economically use that money to make sure that that garden is looked after properly. So spread it over 10 years. You'll keep us all super motivated because having 10k to spend is great. Having nothing for 9 years and then a huge lump, that doesn't fit in with how local committees work. We do request a carry forward on our current funding for this year. If we don't manage to spend it, we have been held up by a requirement to do public consultation on a playground that we're developing. We were only informed about that at the 11th hour. Also, we keep getting held up by signage. We've been doing our own distinct signage in the Garden of Tainui. It's so popular, people have put it on TripAdvisor. How many council reserve signs are on TripAdvisor? So we'd like the freedom to just get on with what we're doing and not have staff members coming going, oh, that doesn't meet council sign standards. Just give us our head and let us get on with it.
It's also on our mandate.
And it is in our reserve management plan that things should be unique and reflect the Akaroa character. And then finally, as I said to you on my other submission, we would really like that maintenance level clarified again. A huge amount of money has been put into this place, and we've really benefited from those local staff that you employed. John Fitch comes to our meeting, the Banks Peninsula Ranger. He's wonderful. And he'll do jobs in the garden, but it's all ad hoc. There's no proper agreement. And ditto, the local community park staff, wonderful. It's so nice now. You can bump into them in the street and you go, oh, Patty, there's a tree down in the Garden of Tainui. Oh, I'll deal with that. It's back. It's wonderful. It's how things used to be. But we need that formal agreement. What do we do? What do they do? And then just a couple of other points that we did want to make. Financial powers. We're currently planning a beautiful carving of a Tainui to be the final piece in the Garden of Tainui. We don't have a bank account anymore because our Garden of Tainui one got shut. So therefore we're having to use a third-party organisation as our fundraising vessel, and that's just weird. So we do want that bank account issue sorted out. And finally, please don't close the Akaroa Service Centre. We need to run down there to do things like get keys, and we really like dealing with local people because they know what we're talking about. We don't like ringing up here, getting stuck on hold for ages, and then getting somebody who hasn't got a clue what the Garden of Tainui is and given the runaround here at Civic. We want to deal with our own staff out there. So happy to take questions.
All right, anything on Garden of Tainui? All right, so now, Suki, let's move into your personal submission.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to address a couple of things. One, the Akaroa wastewater project. You'll know that I have been very involved with that. I really wanted to say, please rethink that. We've got climate change strategy now, identifying drought on Banks Peninsula and water supplies as the principal issue facing the peninsula. Years have been spent trying to find more water for Akaroa. All it's got is the water that comes down in those streams. Unless you start desalinating seawater or trucking it from town, you're not going to find any more water. You need to find and accelerate a process of recycling that water. At the moment, your project is going to spend a huge amount of money sending it somewhere else rather than recycling it. And secondly, the system is far more expensive and with a much larger footprint than necessary because most of the water actually going through the Akaroa system is the stormwater and groundwater. Please bump up on your spending and priorities dealing with the infiltration issues in Akaroa. Make that the priority on this project so that you can reduce the costs. That's point one. Point two, the land drainage charge. I'm pretty concerned about that big land drainage charge that's proposed for rural ratepayers. think it may set a precedent to start applying other charges to rural ratepayers for services that we do not receive. Thirdly, just want to say about the service centre, please don't close that down. It used to function fantastically before the quakes as a combined post office, information centre and council service centre. We're into that, but we don't want the big ships in Akaroa, so price them out and send them off to Littleton and make sure you get those incentives right. Support reduced fees for the Gaiety Hall, wonderful community asset. It needs to be used. It sits there empty too much of the time. And my final point is, and this is tying back to my Reserve Management Committee submissions, that, you know, working with Christchurch City Council is hard. You have to be persistent and you keep, you know, getting knocked back. And what we want to see is an environment where the council really supports what we're doing and comes in behind us and doesn't keep putting roadblocks in the way just when we've been going well. So can we please work on that? One size doesn't fit all. We want to maintain our unique character out in Akaroa. That's what makes it so special and lovely. So help us to do those things instead of trying to shoehorn us all into the same old shoebox. That's my submission.
Great. Thank you very much. Suki, thanks very much indeed for detailed submissions from both of those reserve management committees, and thank you for the work that you and the volunteers are doing in the reserve, and thanks for your personal submission as well. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Okay, so next I would invite Bronwyn McClellan to the table, representing the Friends of Pura Reserve.
Good afternoon.
All right, so you've got 5 minutes to make the presentation.
Awesome. Okay, thank you for this opportunity. I'm Bronwyn McLennan and I represent Friends of Pura Reserve, which is bordering Dyers Pass Road. We need each other. Your goals in your biodiversity strategy are to protect, maintain and restore a natural environment, ensuring our resources and environment are here not only for us, but for our children and future generations. Pest plants and animals must be controlled to protect our native plants and animals. So this is part of your strategy. As a resident bordering the reserve, I started the Friends of Pūrau with generous help and guidance of Heidi Wilton, Christchurch City Council Park Ranger. Since last year, we have engaged over 35 volunteers, everyone from preschoolers, business owners to retirees from the local community. Together, we have totalled 280 hours of work in the reserve. We only inaugurated back in July, which is the equivalent to 7 weeks at 40 hours a week. We have planted natives, wheelbarrowed in gravel for the path, removed pest plants and paid for a park bench seat. We also have created a community of new friends. Heidi Wilton helps us where she can, but I'm aware she is stretched. In 2017, she had 9 volunteer groups to assist. She now has over 45. We need more rangers. Nicholas Head, the senior ecologist for the council, has stated Pūrau Reserve has good potential to restore native forest appropriate for the site. We do need funding to remove large sycamore so we can replace with native species that will feed our endemic birds and wildlife. This is the sticking point. Gaining funding has been particularly difficult, and I've been told by a council member that we don't want to remove a healthy tree, even if it is a weed species. We can have tui downtown alongside the Avon, but we need to create a corridor linking us to Banks Peninsula. I believe predator-free New Zealand starts in our cities, not Fiordland, in our cities. And we have the volunteers on the ground ready and keen to plant natives, remove weeds and trap predators. The national parks are a massive task, but we can do this right here in our city. Wellington has declared the suburb of Miramar pest-free, and they have flocks of kaka downtown. And I've heard more pork in Green Lane in Auckland. But together we can do this. We've got the volunteer power and we've got the backing. We just need more green lights, more funding. So that's me. Is there any questions?
Great, thank you very much. Are there questions? Tim.
Hi, Bronwyn. Thank you for coming and great presentation. We only have 2 community rangers, so we set out, as you know, to work with volunteers, and they were overworked. Do you know of other groups that would like to pick up reserves, as you have done, that are unable to because of the lack of support, not just financial, but of the rangers' support? Because I know Heidi's outstanding. Do you know of other groups?
I don't know specifically of other groups, but I don't know if people feel enabled.
Yeah.
I don't know if they know that it's possible, that they can just go to their local reserve and talk to a park ranger and say, hey, can we do some work here?
Yeah.
I think people just don't know that they can.
Yeah. And it would be very hard to, because Heidi, etc., are just flat out, aren't they?
Yes, they're not. Yeah. They're not terribly visible because they're just so busy where they are.
I'll take one further question from Sarah.
Would you support us setting up some sort of like adopt a park, adopt a reserve kind of thing that made it more visible and had sort of a contact point and those kind of things, so that individuals could move into the system more easily?
Maybe if there was like a sign or something. Regarding the park rangers.
Well, just like so to enable more community groups to do what you're doing.
Yes.
You know, some sort of actual sort of system that was set up to do it, to enable more community groups to look after our parks and reserves and those kind of things.
Well, you do have signage in the reserve, so maybe something on there, saying, hey, do you want to lend a hand?
Yeah.
Here's someone to contact. That might be a good starting point. But people are keen.
Yeah.
I tell them about what we're doing, and they're like, oh, wow, we could do this. Were there more questions?
Okay, that brings us to the end of the time for the submission, unfortunately. But look, thanks for coming along and presenting to us today, and also for your answers to questions. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. All right, so our next submitter, Marie Gray, representing the Summit Road Society. Marie, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the table. And you've got 5 minutes for your presentation today.
Tēnā koutou, nei rā te mihi mai o hā kia koutou. I'm sure most of you know the Summit Road Society, a grassroots conservation organisation working to protect the Port Hills. So it's really timely that I've just immediately followed Bronwyn, because Friends of Pudo Reserve are part of our urban parks pilot, trapping pilot, which took two years to get underway, to get trapping going in urban parks. And I think they caught 4 rats in their first week, and they're trying to get rid of the rats of Kashmir. And I would just really support what Bronwyn was saying there, that there is so much enthusiasm at a grassroots level for taking personal action, for looking after our local spaces. And what people need is they need the support to make it happen. They need more urban rangers. They need the resourcing to make it happen. So this is all part of our wider vision of predator-free Port Hills and pest-free Banks Peninsula. Pest-free Banks Peninsula is a really aspirational program, and things are really ramping up. It's very exciting. A $10 million program is just about to get underway to eradicate a number of predators from Kaiteriti Spit and eradicate possums and suppress a number of other predators from the extended wild side. But the Pest-Free Banks Peninsula strategy is more than those 2 eradication programs. There's a number of other points in that strategy, and that needs support to get underway. So therefore we support the Pest-Free Banks Peninsula's funding request for $120,000 in the 2021 and increasing, to facilitate the expansion of community-led predator control programs into Kākahu Kahukura and the wider peninsula. So Te Kākahu Kahukura is that landscape scale restoration of the southern Port Hills. So that is about 1,000 hectares of bush connecting the peninsula to the city. So it's exciting times ahead, and the council can play a role in supporting the implementation of pest-free Banks Peninsula right on our doorstep. We also support the request for $40,000 per year for the feral goat eradication. We are so close to eradicating feral goats on the peninsula. And as I said, support for the urban dimension as well. You'll be aware we've got our Linda Woods Reserve and our very ambitious plan to plant 87,000 trees over 33 hectares of Oka Valley. We were here in maybe 2 weeks. We've got our Jobs for Nature program, so fingers crossed on that. And we will be developing a network of tracks as well through Oka Valley. And just like to highlight the importance of Duncan Park and the need to review the management plan for Duncan Park, because Duncan Park used to be an urban park, sort of isolated. It is now the gateway to Linda Woods Reserve, as well as the surrounding council reserves. The council has supported the society in a memorandum of understanding agreement financially, but that grant has not been reviewed for 10 years. So we're really grateful for that grant, but it's actually simply not enough, and we'd like you to give thought in the long-term plan looking forward. We support the funding for Rod Donald Binks Peninsula Trust and their ability to sort of make meaningful change in biodiversity and recreation on the peninsula. We do not support the cuts to biodiversity and sustainability funding. We are facing a climate change and ecological crisis, and we need to increase our funding in that area, not decrease it. And we would like to see a support given to the wider waterways within the Christchurch area, transformation of the Otakaro Avon River, but there's also the Opawaho Most Degraded River in Christchurch, Ihutai, Whakaraupo. These are all other really important waterways that we need to be thinking about. We would like the 2 Diamond Harbour properties, 27 Hunters Road and 42 Federal Avenue, to be taken out of the fast track process, but we work in conjunction with the communities with a focus on protecting those gullies, which have very high conservation value. And the Friends of Sam and Morgan's Gully have been active for many years, restoring those gullies. And lastly, we'd like to see the development of the much talked about Port Hills Management Plan actually happen. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Time for one question, if there is one. No question. Sarah.
From last year's stuff, how's the new sort of viewing space progressing? Up by the Son of the Bellbird.
We got $50,000 from the J.D. Stout Charitable Trust.
Yeah.
So we've got about $100,000 to raise.
Yeah.
And we're going to try and do that by the end of this year. And fingers crossed we get started on construction early summer.
That's great. It's going to be really exciting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. All the best with that. Exciting times. Thanks for the submission. Thank you. Okay, so now we come to the personal submission from Helen Broughton. Helen, welcome back to the chamber. Welcome to the table.
Thank you very much.
So you've got 3 minutes to present to us this morning.
Yes, thank you.
Or this afternoon, actually, is it now? Thank you.
Just try and make sure I've got this computer right. Sorry, just put in my passcode. Sorry about this.
We good to go?
Just put in a passcode 111. 111 emergency. Right, that's the wrong way around. Yes, look, thanks for the opportunity, and I'm aware I've only got 3 minutes. The thing I've come to talk to you about is water charges. I'm not out of alignment with the board on this, so it's a board view as well, but I feel very strongly about it. I don't believe you should be charging residential properties. I think we've got the old system, if you like, and I've been on council from 2001 to 2013, and every 3 years we got a proposal for water charging. and every 3 years we actually said no. And I think that continued in the last 2 years of or the 2 terms of council. There was a no to, in fact, water charging. So there's been a change this term, and you seem to have agreed to actually do some form of water charging. The reason that we kicked out water charging in the past was that, and I'll just try and get, sorry, my skills at computers aren't wonderful. Just a minute. Sorry, I'll just have to ad lib. In Christchurch, we're allowed to take out 73 cubic litres of water. In fact, we take out 55. The rest of the Canterbury Plains takes out 6,116 cubic litres of water. So when you look at Christchurch, we're taking a very small part out. And we're not even going up to our current allocated level. So looking at that and all the water that's happening on the plains, I don't think it's fair that Christchurch people are going to have to pay charges for water. The second reason, I believe, is that you're going to have difficulties with water meters. There's a lot of unit housing, particularly in Riccarton, but other areas as well, built in the 70s and 80s that hasn't got water charging meters. And you need to do a very careful calculation on what that water charging will actually, what the cost of replacing water meters will be, or putting them in. And I think, thirdly, I think this is the thin edge of the wedge. Once you start this, then the next year you'll do something else, and eventually in 3 years we'll have water charging for all households. Once you start it once, it becomes hard to reel back. So I'm asking you, please don't do charging for residential households.
That's great, thank you. And that very neatly brings us to the end of the 3 minutes. Your views are very clearly expressed, and thank you very much for coming along and telling us that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll send through that information to, in fact, Samantha, who will put it on.
We'll make sure that
else.
gets distributed.
Good. Thank you.
Helen, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. All right. So next we've got Sonia, who's joining us by Zoom, representing the Christchurch Fluoride-Free New Zealand Action Group. Sonia, thank you for joining us online. Looks like we might have just lost you, unfortunately. We just lost the video feed. Are you there?
She's just disappeared. Do you want to move?
Maybe we'll jump to... Is Dominic McCown here? Dominic, I'll invite you to the table for your personal submission, and then we'll see whether we can get Sonia back online so that we can jump back to her afterwards. So, Dominic, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the table. And you've got 3 minutes to present.
I'd just like to point out my last name's McEwen, not McCowan.
My apologies.
So, I'm here because of the active and ongoing frustration of what should have been a safe cycleway has ended up being problem after problem, and then the same problems just kept on going and no action being taken to address it at all ever since the Worcester Street speed humps were implemented. Previously, the street was a nice wide street. There was never any issues with vehicles, bins. It's safe to ride, very easy. And as a confident cyclist myself, I was really looking forward to a cycleway. What resulted was speed humps and rather disappointing layout. And as the picture, not sure if you can all see it, but it's just a visual and physical obstructions that make it not really accessible or user-friendly. With the build-outs, it affects the direct line of sight for a cyclist you're having to be on your edge every time you come up towards a speed hump without knowing what's next to it. I have encountered many issues time and time again and raised to council via Snaps and Solve regarding bins and vehicles, yet nothing's been done to address this at a fundamental and layout level. That third picture on screen is the Higgins contractor's vehicle, which was quite concerning. To me, this is quite unsafe that vehicles and bins can be placed there in such a obstructive way where designers, reviewers and those in charge of delivering the Cycleways program should have foreseen these potential issues and mitigated against them. I've felt my life has come very close at times, as you can see by the pictures. On the left-hand side one, it's a wee way distance from a speed hump, yet you can't tell if there's a driveway or there's any obstructions, furniture or whatever's in the way. You're having to rely at the last minute to make a snap decision. Do I take this bypass or do I go over the speed hump and be put into and potentially an oncoming vehicle, which so often you just don't know. And I've come to the conclusion myself that I'm going over the speed humps because it's better and safer for me rather than coming across any of these issues. When rubbish day, you have the trucks going down, they tend to block the exits of these so-called bypasses, like the middle picture. That's not really safe if we're trying to encourage safe cycling and promote the accessibility towards the CBD. With the bins being put in there, put curbside, these build-outs, people are pushing them out further because designers and reviewers failed to consider the impact of this infrastructure and how it would affect communities.
And we are going to need to draw this to a close. We're beyond the end of the 3 minutes. The pictures really tell the story that you're telling, it's fair to say.
Yeah. If I could just add, there's been no budget ever available for remediation of layouts and issues like this. And it would be great if we could have some budget made available effective immediately to remediate this layout and other layouts, as there's issues which need to be addressed urgently.
It's a very clear request. The pictures illustrate the issue that you're talking about very, very well. Thank you very much indeed for coming along and pointing this out to us today. The request is very clear. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's now move to Colleen Phillip from Sustainable Otatahi Christchurch Incorporated. Colleen, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the table. And you've got 5 minutes for your submission this afternoon.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Sustainable Otatahi Christchurch, or SOC, as we are often called. As we said in our written submission, and indeed as is referenced in the LTP discussion document, the LTP and the draft climate strategy are and must be inextricably linked. Thus, it is encouraging to see a consciousness of the climate crisis reflected in the LTP, especially in such areas as transport. It is important that momentum continue with cycleway provision. We realise pushback, and I'm not referring to the previous submission here, genuine concerns like that are not what I'm referring to here. We realise that pushback has at times been intense with regard to these, but we only need to look back in recent history to such things as smoke-free legislation to remember there is always pushback to inevitable and necessary societal changes. But the sky does not fall in, even on the most vociferous and adversarial, and the world moves on to where it needs to be. SOC believe you should be open to bringing the cycleway program forward. It is critical infrastructure with major flow-on effects. Doing it sooner would be an investment which would head off other costs in the future. As you say in the LTP, people want Greater Christchurch to be green, safe, sustainable, affordable, And most people in Christchurch have expressed very clearly their priorities in the residential red zone. Quick wins with community assistance are available with ecological restoration. With an ecological crisis alongside a climate crisis, ecological work must be prioritised. We will speak to the climate document next week, so I will move to other aspects of our submission on the LTP. The library service. Please do not start a sinking lid on your library services. It's a false economy. 97% of Christchurch feel positive towards our libraries. How many feel that way towards the council overall? In some ways, your librarians and libraries and library staff could be seen to be helping save your reputational bacon. SOC have a number of ways we have experienced the excellence of the library staff and service. Our project Speaking for the Planet has an annual competition day held at Tūranga this year on June 11th. We engage with library staff for that event, and this year we are touring the young people's artworks around suburban libraries as well. We are leading an environmental leadership and heritage of Christchurch Canterbury project where we have taken oral histories of early still living environmental leaders. We are consulting with library personnel on our communication plan and will use library infrastructure when bringing this project to the community. We hold meetings at Tūranga and South Library in particular, small working meetings, not executive or public meetings, which we tend to hold at the WEA, hence our support for their submission on the LTP. We have a number of executive members living near South Library. Seriously, when I mention South Library to people, their eyes light up. It is a well-loved, important part of that community. I did an iNaturalist course recently in preparation for the Worldwide City Nature Challenge. Who taught it? A library staff member. Christchurch is becoming famous for our libraries. They are part of the city's character and need to be protected and celebrated, not quietly eroded. As an active community organisation, we do find Christchurch City Council's interface with community challenging. I won't do fine-grained detail here, it's inappropriate in a public forum. However, suffice to say, SOC rely on some very good staff members who, despite what appears to us as outsiders to be a rather unbalanced workload distribution within the council, do try hard to be there for us and help. The council we don't see worries us. The bureaucratic structure, which I confess sometimes feels a bit like a black hole. You have work to do, making sure the money you spend is spent in the service of Ōtautahi Christchurch, and that the organisation is outward-facing, outward-looking and internally well-functioning, and that the processes you use actually do deliver what we need and ask for. Thank you so much for your time today.
And thank you for your time as well for presenting that to us. There's time for one question, if there is one. The submission is very clear. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So now our next submission is from Maria Stoker-Farrell. Maria, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is my partner, Patty.
Excellent. Welcome to you both. And you've got 3 minutes to present to us this afternoon.
Right. Thank you very much for allowing us to come along and speak on behalf of the Diamond Harbour School, which have made a submission but are not able to come along this morning. So we're talking about the piece of land at the top of Fira Avenue in Diamond Harbour and Bayview, which is proposed maybe for sale by the council and development. And we're just concerned about a few points. That land has got beautiful walkways on it, which have been developed by the local people and tended by the children of the school, which is adjacent to the land. The land contains a walkway that transports children from Waipapa Ave and Diamond Harbour, which is quite a long way, through the fields and into the school. And the school, I checked with the school, and they have about 20 to 30 children using the walkway morning and night. The alternative to them using the walkway would be going around a very long circuitous route through roads, and the roads are narrow and twisty and quite dangerous, they feel, and the pathways are narrow as well, so the pavements to the roads. So we're very concerned that the children might not be able to use that route which they've developed themselves. There's hoses being laid down with bins, big blue bins, and they water the plants as they go along, and the plants are all doing extremely well. So that's our main concern, that the walkways might be retained. Paddy, have you got anything to say that?
Yes. We're together, both Diamond Harbour residents. We've lived there for quite a long time.
25 years.
We've been involved over the years in planting trees, as have the kids at the local school. And we've helped care for those trees too, as have the kids at the school. And we're opposed to the development for that reason, the protection of the trees, and also the amount of, with development, the amount of trucks and heavy vehicles on those roads, which are already overused, really. In the, 15 years I've lived over there, the traffic has increased, the speed of the traffic has increased. And we just feel that development is that's not the place for it.
And every time we go on the walk, we meet children playing, even if they're not going to school, like the weekends they're playing, they are, sort of moving around. So.
All right. Look, thank you very much indeed for coming along and sharing that with us this morning. Yours is one of a number of submissions that we've received on exactly this matter. Mm-hmm. But what you've done is share some of your local first-hand experience and a bit of the history of how things came to be the way that they are on that land, which has been very useful. So thank you very much indeed for taking the time to do that and coming along and speaking with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now moving to the last group of submitters for this morning's session. So we've got a personal submission from Marie Gray. So Marie, we'll welcome you back to the table for your 3-minute personal submission.
Kia ora koutou. So now speaking on behalf of myself and my family. And I really want to start by saying that we have to be very careful of a false economy with rate rises, and that we don't actually put the burden of the costs of today onto our children. And that I'm much more favour a approach where we work out what we meaningfully need to do to address the emergencies we face around climate change and ecological degradation. And make Christchurch an amazing place to live, and we work out our rates contribution from there, because I am prepared to pay more to have the city that I want for my children. My priorities are around climate change, and I've got a submission on the climate change strategy, but I'm a big supporter of cycleways, and I use the cycleways with my children. And I will not cycle on the road without cycleways with my children, because the world has changed since I was a kid and zooming around Linwood. I want to see a proper investment in our water infrastructure. I think I saw an article recently, and councils are only investing about 50% of what they actually need to invest. I know this is a big issue and it involves the government as well, but all we're doing by underinvesting in infrastructure is we put the burden onto our children and to our grandchildren. I want to support some of the measures that have been talked about by others around libraries. Please do not cut services to libraries. They are the hub of our community. Also, please do not cut the school programs for the art gallery. My kids have gone to that school program. It's amazing. And these are all part of making this a city where we want to live in. You probably have picked up that I'm a big supporter of our parks as well, and want to see huge investment in our parks, our urban ranges, and our biodiversity initiatives where people take personal action. And I also do support the focus on heritage and support for the Arts Centre and the other heritage buildings, because I believe, you don't know where you're going unless you know where you come from, and this is part of our heritage as Christchurch. So I am supportive of it, and I am willing to pay for it as well. So thanks.
Thank you. Thanks very much indeed. Time for one question, if there is one. All right. Thank you very much indeed for coming along. Great. Thank you. Bob Frame. Is Bob here? Bob, thanks to you also for joining us today. Welcome to the table.
Thank you very much. Kia ora tātou, Bob Frame from Diamond Harbour. I have 3 points which I'll try and squeeze into my 3 minutes, and they go by scale. The first one actually follows from Marie and Paddy's point, is the sale of Ferro Avenue in Diamond Harbour, and just bringing to the Council's attention point 1.11 in the Community Board submission, which says that the Board does not support the process of consulting on the potential disposal of properties via the long-term plan, and seeks that the community be involved in that. And as an individual, I think that public access, particularly as outlined by Paddy and Maria, is exceptionally important, and a huge amount of effort has gone into enabling that to happen. I think that Paddy and Maria have spoken on that. I'm not going to continue further on that. Happy to take questions, but certainly existing public access does need to be retained there. The second point is also in the Banks Peninsula Community Board plan, which turns to the head-to-head walkway, which is item, oh, there's quite a lot in there, 1.8, our Heritage Foreshore and Parks. Can I just talk in support of the head-to-head walkway with which I'm involved? And there are 2 budget items, ID 408 and ID 245, in support of that. And just to say that the amount of work required will be significant, and we do hope that our side of the harbour will get paths as wide as they are over at Redcliffs, where it's quite spectacular, and the council is to be highly commended on that. So we hope that that will go ahead, and there's certainly a lot of work going ahead with landowners in the harbour on getting access to various parts. And my third and final point is very much a long-term plan point, and that comes, strangely enough, from the former Governor of the Bank of Canada and the former Governor of the Bank of England. And he now works for the United Nations. His point is, if you have a chance in a situation like this, to ask this simple question: with 192 countries having signed up for net carbon zero by 2050, and that to be ratified again this year, the impacts of that coming down through the Climate Change Commission will mean radical restructure to infrastructure. I think we're talking about a 1/3 reduction in car journeys by 2035. So it needs to be clear within the plan just quite what the pathway is for the infrastructure investment that will enable that to happen. That's not necessarily assuming that the answer is currently known, but that it will be known relatively soon so that infrastructure can be in place. With 12 to go, I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. 3 key points, well articulated, well understood. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. All right, so has Alice Tickle arrived? Alice, welcome to the table. Now we've got Alice Tickle and Karaitiana Tickle, 2 separate submissions. Yep, all right. So, Alice, let's hear your personal submission first.
Thank you.
3 minutes on that one.
Right, I'm just coming as a resident, so I thought I'd just start simply with who I am. So, I whakapapa into Ngāi Tahu, Ngāti Māmoe Waitaha, and Ngāti Rekihu, which is in that area. So, as a resident, I'm interested in the Kukupa Lodge, and we live in that community. In my submission, I've only put in a couple of points, and they're related to the fact that it's there in our community, and knowing a little bit about me is important. So I'll just tell you quickly. So I've come from a background of early childhood and primary teaching and social work, and at the moment counselling, and my youngest child's 21 and my oldest child's 40. So, and always been involved in education. So as a community resident, I've wandered around and talked to different people, fishermen and a variety of different people in the community, and I think there's a general sadness that not too much has really happened there for a long time. And we've walked through there with our dogs, and I have a lot of friends in the community who are very young children, and they have no idea what I do for a job, but I'm always questioning what they're interested in, and I think they feel very passionate that they'd like something to happen, and if they even got a skateboard ramp, they'd be excited. So, so I'm coming from very much that place. Walking through there, it feels sad and lonely and left, and like the longer it gets left, the worse it becomes, and there's so much opportunity. And because in my work I experience such a huge amount of healing that happens in the environment, and I've just come from work now, and we've just, having children with their gumboots on in the puddles. So I think it's a beautiful opportunity to restore and to open up and allow those children that are already there as a community opportunity to share that place, as well as the environment and the people. So ask me some questions, I love them.
All right. There's time
Sorry,
for
I haven't got a PowerPoint or anything.
That's all right. That's no problem at all.
Yeah.
There's time for just one question, if indeed there is a question. Sarah.
What's the current state of the building?
If you walk past, it's got kind of wood all over the doors. It looks, it's just completely boarded up with nothing. I talked to an old fellow a few days ago, and he's very excited about opportunities for change, and told me a lovely story, which I said I won't share, but I will. He when I said I wouldn't share, I said I don't know that that's going to be appropriate, but he said, I parked my caravan there, and if it wasn't for being allowed to park my caravan there for a few years, then I wouldn't have bought this property and got to know what the Eastern Bays are like. And we've had a few parties in that hall, the fire's all right there, so I suppose the reason I wouldn't share that story, why I'm saying it, is because I think it's more than a place for parties. I think it's a place for regeneration of the spirit of the community. And from what I hear, because we went to the Centennial on a few weekends ago, listening to some of the stories of some of the things that have happened in the bay, and the fact that you've got a resource of the water and sailing. And one of my little clients that I've had a few weeks ago was sharing with me, he struggles in the school system, but he went to Akaroa and he had the opportunity to learn how to sail from a local person. And the highlight in his life and how that's changed, just a simple act of having 3 days in the water, and he could do it, but the other kids couldn't because they just couldn't do that process. He's really hands-on. So I just think healing the water, the rongoa, the native bush, there's some beautiful plants in that place. There's a lot of it's overgrown, but the sooner that we got an opportunity to get restoring and get the community in, and us as a service, planting more rongoa, because it's full of kawakawa, and you could have paharakiki there and weavers, and
Indeed. Now, thanks for outlining, the opportunity as you see it, and thanks for coming along and speaking to us on this today. Thanks very much indeed for the submission.
Thank you.
So then finally for this session of hearings, I'd invite Karatiana Tickle to the table, please. Thank you for joining us.
Nami. O tēnā hoki rā koutou, marungana tini koro te wā neira no te mihi kia koutou uru maira, hei hui tahi ai ki runga tēnei rā whakahirahira, nera no te mihi mai i a mātou rā o pura whetū. Hei taki ai ana tātou kia koutou e pāna ki te tehi kaupapa kei roto a whakaroa. Nō reira nera no te mihi kia koutou. So, my name's Karaitiana. I'm a uri of Ngaitahu, Tūhaitara, Maru Kaitātea, and Irakehu. So the opportunity recently arrived. I was floating around on the GET site and noticed that the Kukupa hostel, as it was known, and previous to that was a school. There was an EOI and then a subsequent RFP. And I've noted that in 2 or 3 incidences where that's been placed up, it's been unsuccessful in the response. And one of my points is that I think that if you would consider bringing forward a possible council investment into the first 5-year period of your planning, that may invigorate those possible individuals or organisations who are considering this particular site. So that's my 1.8. I also, as an organisation, we operate throughout Canterbury. We're currently working with some 1,500 young people in collaborative services with a number of other not-for-profit, non-government organisations. And one of the opportunities that we offer young people is the opportunity to use Te Pāo Rākai Hautu, the Banks Peninsula. And we take them through an outdoor program of pursuit opportunities. Most of the people who engage with our services, this type of opportunity is not often available to them. I think, just listening and referencing what Alice was talking about, the people that she's been speaking to in their lifetime, standing in the outdoors is a natural part of life in this country. But for the young people we work with, and often it's become a fantasy. And one of our opportunities is to make that a reality. We see sites like the Kukupa Hostel as possible points of reference for us to utilise with young people and instill hope and aspiration. Furthermore, moving to point 1.11, which is in regard to the disposal of surplus council-owned properties. As an organisation, we support the disposal of council-owned assets and properties, but consider it as it would be norm today to consider in the first instance that is representative and supports tangata whenua activity, but secondly that it also considers the well-being and ongoing hauora of our future. So that if you consider the disposal of an asset such as the hostel or any other site, that you first consider how might this be of benefit to our communities at a community level. Kia ora. Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora. Thank you very much indeed. Are there any questions? Sarah.
Kia ora, thank you. So with the expressions of interest process, because the building, the lodge is in such a kind of poor state at the moment, do you think that put people off, and having the certainty of an upgrade, if you like, much earlier might encourage people to express an interest in leasing, let alone potentially? Absolutely, in leasing or some type of other partnership or relationship. I think that as you can imagine, the buyer sits with the potential leaseholder. Yeah. And that may in fact, demand a significant investment. I did note in one of the previous documents written about the Kukupa Hostel that there were some type of earthquake repair strategy,
being developed, and this particular document was written in about 2014, so I don't know where that's progressed to or what the current status is.
Kia ora.
Thank you. All right. Thanks very much indeed for the submission and for coming along and speaking to us today. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so that now brings us to the end of the session today. Sonia, who was going to be appearing on the Zoom link, didn't come back to us, so we will rebook her for another time. So that brings us to the end of today's session, so I'll now adjourn this meeting until 1:30 on Tuesday, the 18th of May. So that's 1:30 next Tuesday, adjourned until then. Thank you very much.